You've been told that if you just try harder, care more, fix everything around you, then life will finally feel okay. That peace will come when everything goes your way. But what if that's the biggest lie of all? What if trying to control everything is the very thing making you exhausted, anxious, and stuck? Because no matter how hard you try, some things won't change. People leave, plans fall apart. The past doesn't rewrite itself just because you wish it would. And yet, you keep fighting reality like it's your enemy. Like accepting it means giving up. But here's the truth no one told you. Acceptance isn't weakness, it's freedom. It's the quiet power of saying, I don't like this, but I will not let it destroy me. It's choosing peace even when life doesn't play fair. And tonight, you're going to feel that shift. You're going to learn how to let go, not because it's easy, but because holding on is breaking you. Through teachings from ancient wisdom, modern science, and the quiet strength of those who've walked through fire and found peace on the other side, you'll begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time: relief. Your breath will slow, the war in your head will start to quiet, and when morning comes, you won't wake up drowning in resistance. You'll wake up floating. This isn't just something to help you sleep. This is the beginning of a lighter life. Are you ready? Let's begin. Most people never realize it, but the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the tension that refuses to leave your shoulders, it's not just stress, it's resistance. Resistance to what is. A silent war between how you want life to be and how it actually is. And the brain? It's caught in the middle. Every time you hold on to control, try to fix the unfixable, or wish things were different, your mind and body suffer. But when you learn to surrender, not give up, but let go, something changes deep inside, not just emotionally, but physically, chemically, neurologically. You don't just feel better, you actually become better. Surrender isn't an act of failure, it's a shift in your biology. When you stop resisting life and start accepting it, your brain begins to heal, and not in theory, in practice, in your cells, in your nervous system. Letting go is something your body understands long before your mind does, and the science behind it will surprise you. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what you focus on and how you respond to the world. This is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function over time. But here's what they don't always tell you. Chronic stress, fear, and resistance shrink that ability. When you're stuck in survival mode, your brain becomes rigid. You stop learning, you stop growing, your reactions become automatic, impulsive. You're not thinking, you're defending. The brain prioritizes defense over development, and as long as you're clinging to what can't be controlled, you're reinforcing the very circuits that keep you anxious, reactive, and emotionally exhausted. Letting go flips that entire script. When you accept what is, even if it hurts, even if you hate it, signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed, that it, 39, safe to stop fighting. And when safety returns, so does growth. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, empathy, and emotional regulation, lights back up. It re-engages. New neural pathways begin to form. You're not stuck anymore. You, 39, re-evolving. That shift doesn't happen through effort. It happens through release. When you finally stop forcing, pushing, clenching, your brain switches from survival to repair. The parasympathetic nervous system takes over the rest and digest system. Heart rate slows, muscles soften, cortisol, your main stress hormone, starts to drop, and in its place, oxytocin and serotonin begin to rise, chemicals linked to connection, peace, and emotional balance. The most powerful thing about surrender is how quietly it heals you. You may not notice it at first. You'll just realize one day that you're not overthinking like before, that your body isn't bracing all the time, that you can sit with discomfort without needing to run from it. That's the brain returning to balance. The hippocampus, the region of your brain involved in memory and emotional learning, begins to function more clearly when stress is reduced. People often say that when they let go of resentment or grief, they remember things more vividly or feel more present in their daily life. That's not a coincidence. Chronic resistance muddies your emotional memory. Acceptance clarifies it. But it goes deeper. Letting go also activates parts of the brain connected to creativity. When your energy isn't being spent on suppressing emotion or trying to force outcomes, it becomes available for insight, curiosity, and new ways of thinking. That's why people who finally surrender often feel inspired afterward, not because life suddenly got easier, but because their brains were freed from inner war. And with that space, new solutions start to appear. What's fascinating is that the brain doesn't need the problem to change. It needs your relationship to the problem to change. Acceptance does that. It's not about pretending everything is okay. It's about recognizing that even if it's not, you can stop resisting it. You can stop feeding the loop of tension and control. And in doing that, the emotional charge around the issue starts to fade. Not instantly, but steadily. This is where long-term emotional health begins to build. When you practice acceptance regularly, even in the small, ordinary moments, a delay, a disagreement, a disappointment, you train your brain to tolerate discomfort without panic. This builds resilience. Not the hard kind that grits its teeth, but the soft kind that bends without breaking. The kind that knows, I can feel this, and it won't destroy me. Resilience is less about strength and more about flexibility. The brain becomes more emotionally agile the more it learns to let go. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop gripping. Caring without clinging, feeling without drowning. And when you master that, your emotional baseline shifts. You stop riding the roller coaster of highs and lows. You begin to live in what psychologists call adaptive regulation. You still feel, but you're not thrown off course every time life turns. Acceptance also improves interpersonal relationships, and not just emotionally, but neurologically. Mirror neurons, the brain cells that allow you to feel empathy, function better when the nervous system is calm. That means when you, 39, were not in a state of resistance, you're more capable of understanding others. You're less reactive, less defensive. Conversations go deeper. Conflicts de-escalate faster. And instead of trying to fix or control people, you start meeting them where they are. Because that's what you're doing for yourself, too. What happens next is almost paradoxical. The more you let go, the more influence you actually gain. Not over others, but over your own life. When your internal state isn't being hijacked by chaos or the need for control, you start making better decisions. Clearer ones. You start living intentionally rather than reactively. This is where peace comes from. Not from avoiding pain, but from becoming someone who doesn't fear it. Your body starts to follow this rhythm too. Studies have shown that chronic stress and resistance can increase inflammation, weaken the immune system, and even alter your gut microbiome. But practices linked to acceptance like breathwork, mindfulness, and reflective rest reduce systemic inflammation. They increase heart rate variability, which is a strong marker of emotional regulation, overall health. People who accept their emotions rather than fight them recover faster from illness. They sleep better, they digest better, they age slower. Letting go doesn't mean everything gets easier. It means you stop making it harder. It means your brain stops bracing against a life that's already happening. And when you do that, when you really surrender, you stop living in resistance and you start living in response. That is where freedom begins. You might still face heartbreak, uncertainty, loss. But your brain won't treat every challenge like a crisis. It will know the difference. That's emotional intelligence at the neurological level. You begin to trust your ability to feel hard things and return to center. And here's something no one talks about. Surrender actually helps you learn faster, because when you're not defending yourself all the time, you can absorb new information more easily. You're more open, receptive, and the brain loves that. It rewards that openness by creating new synapses, new pathways. It treats surrender not as weakness, but as a green light for transformation. This is why people who embrace change, even painful change, tend to grow more in life. Their brains are literally more adaptable. They're not trapped in old beliefs, old patterns, old survival strategies. They evolve. So much of healing comes down to permission. And acceptance is how you give your brain that permission to rest, to release, to repair. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, like rain softening, dry earth. Over time, that softening becomes strength. You might still have thoughts that say, "I can't let this go." That's okay. Thoughts don't need to disappear. They just need space. When you let them be there without believing all of them, your brain doesn't grip them so tightly. You create distance. And in that distance, awareness grows. Acceptance gives you that awareness, and awareness rewires everything. The truth is, your brain isn't against you. It's just responding to how you treat your experience. If you treat everything like a threat, it will armor up. If you treat your experience, even the hard parts, with openness and curiosity, it will soften. It will support you. Letting go doesn't mean losing. It means shifting from control to connection, from fear to flow, from survival to presence. This isn't passive. This is the most active kind of peace you'll ever know. The kind you practice, moment by moment. The kind that doesn't need things to be perfect to feel okay. The kind that builds in your nervous system and becomes the ground you walk on. No one teaches us this when we're young. We're taught to fight, to win, to fix. But no one says, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pushing. And so we burn out. We grip harder. We tell ourselves stories like, "I should have done more," or "if only things were different." But the moment you pause and say, "This is how it is right now, and I'll meet it with peace, not panic," something shifts. The story begins to unravel, not because you found all the answers, but because you stopped needing them. And that shift, that's where the brain starts to bloom. This is how peace grows, not from changing the world, but from changing how you meet it, from changing what you do with the parts you can't control. And surrender isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new one where your energy is no longer wasted on resistance, but invested in renewal. Letting go gives you back to yourself. And once that happens, life doesn't 39. Just get quieter. It gets clearer, sharper, truer. This is what your brain was made for, not control, but connection, not fear, but flow, not resistance, but peace. Let it begin. The moment you stop resisting life as it is, something inside you begins to relax. That part of your mind that's been gripping, bracing, overthinking, it slowly starts to quiet. And in that silence, something deeper begins to rise. Not just your own emotions, but feelings that have lived in you for longer than you've been aware. Patterns you didn't choose, fears that don't entirely feel like yours, behaviors that repeat like a script written generations ago. This is where acceptance meets something even more hidden, the pain you inherited. Not all burdens begin with you. Some were passed down in words, in silence, in how love was given or withheld. The unspoken rules, the pressure, the emotional weight that never seemed to have a clear source. This isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility, because the moment you become aware of what you've inherited, you get to decide what continues and what ends with you. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Studies in epigenetics show that trauma can actually be passed through generations, not just as stories or behaviors, but biologically. Stress responses, sensitivity to rejection, emotional shutdown. Sometimes the fear you feel in your body isn't 39T, yours, but your mother's or her father's. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're carrying things that were never fully processed. And until they are seen, they will keep repeating. Awareness is the first step, not in a vague, mystical way, but in a real, grounded sense. You begin to notice patterns, the way you apologize, even when you haven't done anything wrong, the way you expect disappointment, even when things are going well, the way you feel responsible for other people's emotions, like their sadness is somehow your fault. These responses are often rooted in early survival, not necessarily from your life, but from the lives before yours. When parents carry unresolved pain, it often shows up as overprotection, emotional distance, perfectionism, or control. These aren't conscious choices. They're attempts to keep you safe, or more accurately, to keep themselves safe through you. Maybe your father couldn't express softness because his own vulnerability was punished. Maybe your mother tried to control everything because her childhood was full of chaos. Their wounds shaped their parenting, and their silence became your instruction. The hard part is that as children, we don't 39T just see these patterns, we internalize them. We build up self-image through their eyes. If love was conditional, we learn to earn it. If emotions were dangerous, we learn to hide them. And slowly, we inherit not just traits, but identities. The fixer, the strong one, the quiet one, the responsible one. These roles don't reflect your true self. They reflect your emotional inheritance. Acceptance begins when you stop blaming and start observing. Blaming your parents or grandparents may feel justified, but it doesn't heal. Observation does. When you can say, "This pain didn't start with me, but it lives in me," you step out of victimhood and into clarity. You stop passing the pain forward and begin meeting it with compassion. Compassion doesn't excuse harm. It simply understands it. It says, "I see why this pattern exists, and I choose to meet it with awareness instead of reaction." This is where true freedom starts, not by rewriting the past, but by refusing to repeat it. Repetition is the default of the unconscious mind. What isn't seen becomes destiny. That's why acceptance requires presence. Every time you pause and name the emotion instead of acting it out, you disrupt the inheritance. You interrupt the cycle. When you feel anger rising and choose not to lash out, you're not just controlling behavior, you're changing the emotional blueprint. That's powerful. This doesn't happen all at once. Emotional inheritance is layered. Some patterns are loud and obvious. Others are subtle, like a quiet shame that whispers you, 39. Not enough. To work through them, you have to be patient, not passive patient. Because healing this kind of pain is not a single breakthrough. 39's age, long, steady relationship with truth. The nervous system plays a major role here. Inherited trauma often shows up as hypervigilance, always being on edge, waiting for something to go wrong, or as shut down, going numb in conflict, not knowing how to speak. These reactions aren't weakness. They're learned survival responses, passed down like stories etched into the nervous system. But just as they were learned, they can be unlearned. This is why practices like breathwork, grounding exercises, and somatic therapy are so effective. They speak the language of the body, where much of this emotional history lives. You can't think your way out of inherited trauma. You have to feel your way through it with safety, with support, and with slowness. Another layer of inherited pain is identity, the pressure to become someone you're not, to fulfill a dream that wasn't yours. Maybe your family expected you to succeed in a way that made their pain worthwhile. Maybe you were taught that being sensitive was a weakness, so you learned to harden. Maybe love was earned through achievement, not presence. These expectations shape your choices, your relationships, even your self-worth. And they're not always spoken. Often they live in silence, in what was never said, but always felt. To break free, you have to question those expectations. Whose voice is driving your life? Whose approval are you still trying to win? Acceptance means releasing the need to become someone for someone else's peace. It means stepping out of inherited identity and into authenticity, even if that means being misunderstood. Misunderstanding is part of this process. When you stop playing the role your family assigned you, there will be discomfort. Some may see your healing as rejection. Some may call it selfishness. But choosing peace over pleasing is not selfish, it's honest. And honesty is the first form of true love, even when it's messy. You don't heal generational pain by confronting your family with anger. You heal it by confronting yourself with truth. By being willing to see the parts of you that were shaped in fear and choose not to act from them anymore. That's the work. That's the release. Sometimes that release feels like grief. You grieve the parents you wish you had, the childhood you didn't get, the nurturing that never came. This grief is real. It's not about blaming. It's about finally allowing the truth to be seen. Grieving what you didn't receive opens space to give it to yourself, maybe for the first time. Self-parenting is one of the most powerful tools in breaking generational cycles. When you start offering yourself the love, protection, and validation you never got, your brain begins to rewire. Your nervous system finds safety from within. And slowly, you stop outsourcing your worth to people who couldn't give it to you, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started seeing yourself clearly. There's also something important about forgiving the unspoken. Often, the pain wasn't in what was done, but in what was never acknowledged. The silence around mental health, the avoidance of real conversations, the lack of apology, the missing tenderness. You don't have to wait for others to admit the harm. You can name it, you can feel it, and you can choose to stop carrying it forward. This is the essence of ancestral healing. Not mystical rituals, although those can help, but practical, conscious decisions to face what previous generations couldn't, to feel what they had to suppress. 2. Create space where they lived, in survival. That is a legacy worth passing on. Legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what you no longer pass down. Every time you soothe your inner child instead of punishing them, you shift the future. Every time you say no to a pattern that once ruled you, you rewire your lineage. The beauty of this work is that it's invisible. No one will clap for you when you choose not to yell, not to shame, not to shut down, but the impact will echo in your relationships, in your children, if you have them, in the people you lead or love. You become the one who changed the direction. There's peace in knowing that your pain had a purpose, not because it was deserved, but because it gave you the insight to stop it from continuing. That kind of peace doesn't scream, it settles, it breathes. It lets you rest in your body like it's finally safe to be here. You don't need to understand every detail of your family's history to release the emotional weight. You just need to become conscious of what you're carrying and decide to lay it down. Every time you react differently, choose differently, feel differently, you are rewriting that history. Healing doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming present. Present enough to feel what arises, without needing to escape. Present enough to respond instead of repeat. Present enough to forgive, not for their sake, but for your own release. You're allowed to want more for yourself than what you came from. You're allowed to create a life that feels like home, even if the one you were raised in didn't. You're allowed to feel proud of your progress, even if no one else sees it. Because breaking inherited cycles is invisible work until it isn't. Until one day you look back and realize that burden isn't on your back anymore. And the silence that once held you hostage, it's now your quiet strength. That's how lineage transforms, not with noise, but with awareness, with love, with truth, with you. The moment you realize that some of what you've carried didn't begin with you, something softens. There's relief in knowing you can let go of pain that was never truly yours. But then, a different kind of heaviness begins to surface, the weight of time, the ache of things you didn't do, words you didn't say, chances you didn't take, the quiet echo of what could have been, not from someone else's story, but from your own. You start to wonder how different things might look if you had made a different choice, left sooner, spoken up, said yes, said no. That ache has a name, IT, 39. Called time-based trauma. The grief not of what happened, but of what never did. The version of your life that never got to unfold. And it hurts not because it's visible, but because it lingers quietly behind every what if. Regret is a silent companion. It shows up in moments of stillness. It hides in the pause between tasks, in the space before sleep. IT, 39. Not loud, but it's heavy. And it convinces you that you're too late. That you've missed your chance. That the time you lost defines the value of everything that comes next. But that's a lie. One that your nervous system believes until you teach it otherwise. The truth is, your past doesn't have to be your prison. Missed opportunities don't mean a wasted life. The human brain is hardwired to assign meaning to patterns. It fills in gaps. It imagines alternate endings. But what it doesn't always do well is forgive, especially when the regret is directed inward. Especially when the pain feels self-inflicted. That's where acceptance becomes essential. Acceptance here doesn't mean pretending the past was perfect. It means facing what was real without distorting it into something worse or idealizing it into something it never actually was. The brain, when stuck in regret, often edits the past. It makes it cleaner, simpler, or more tragic than it really was. That distortion becomes fuel for shame, and shame traps you in inaction. You don't move forward not because you don't want to, but because you feel you don't deserve to. Reframing wasted time starts with understanding how the brain processes perceived failure. The more emotional weight you attach to a missed opportunity, the more your brain replays it. This loop reinforces the belief that your life is broken or worse, that you are. But what really happened is this. You made a choice with the information, emotional capacity, and self-awareness you had at that time. That version of you couldn't have done differently, not because you were flawed, but because you weren't ready. And readiness isn't always visible until you're on the other side of it. The pain of looking back is often amplified by the illusion that others got it right, that their path was linear, successful, clean. Social comparison adds another layer of suffering. You measure your internal timeline against someone else's external highlights. But timelines are not moral structures. There is no wrong age to grow, no wrong year to wake up, no deadline on healing. You are not late. You are arriving in your own time. Letting go of what could have been means giving yourself permission to mourn what didn't happen without letting it poison what still can. It means realizing that grief and possibility can coexist. You can be sad about what you missed and still be open to what's next. These feelings don't cancel each other out. They expand you. The fear of lost time often hides a deeper fear, that you won't get another chance, that you've peaked, or plateaued, or failed too deeply to rise again. But neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change and grow, doesn't expire. It responds not to age, but to presence. The more fully you show up now, the more your brain begins to open to new possibilities. You stop being defined by the past and start being shaped by the moment. People often think healing is about erasing the past, but true healing is about integrating it, letting it sit beside you without steering the wheel. When you stop resisting your history, it stops controlling you. You learn from it. You draw boundaries because of it. You make better choices through it. In this way, nothing is wasted, not even the darkest chapters. There is also wisdom in broken timelines. Detours often teach you what direct paths never could. The years you spent lost, stuck, confused, or in pain, those years softened your ego, deepened your compassion, clarified your values. They taught you what matters by showing you what doesn't. And even if you wish it hadn't taken so long, there's power in knowing that you got here at all. Part of releasing time-based trauma is separating the event from the identity. A missed opportunity is something that happened. It is not who you are. Failure is something that occurred. It is not your character. When the mind fuses regret with self-worth, it builds a false identity. One that says, I'm the point kind of person who always messes up, who always gets it too late. That belief becomes a filter. You stop seeing possibility. You only see proof that you were right to feel ashamed. To break that pattern, you need evidence of the opposite. Small wins, new beginnings. Moments where you say yes to something now, even if it's small. The nervous system responds to consistency, not perfection. Every time you choose presence over punishment, it recalibrates. Your mind begins to trust you again. Your body feels safer in them now. Regret also tends to focus on control, the illusion that if you had just done one thing differently, everything would be better. But this ignores how many variables you never controlled: other people's choices, the timing of events, the knowledge you didn't have access to, the emotional maturity that hadn't developed yet. When you zoom out, you see that life wasn't a straight line you failed to follow. It was a complex map you were never meant to fully understand. Letting go of what could have been doesn't mean you forget your past. It means you no longer let it define your capacity for joy, love, or meaning. It means you stop waiting to be caught up and start living where you are. It means choosing peace, not perfection. And peace doesn't ask you to erase your story only to hold it differently. One of the most effective ways to shift your relationship with the past is to reinterpret it through a compassionate lens, not with denial, but with depth. Ask yourself, what did I learn from what I didn't get? What strength was developed in the waiting? What clarity emerged from the disappointment? This isn't toxic positivity. It's emotional alchemy turning pain into perspective. The fear of wasting time can also make you grasp at urgency, rushing into things just to feel like you're not falling behind. But urgency is rarely rooted in intuition. It's often a trauma response. True clarity comes from stillness, not speed. When you slow down and accept where you are, you stop chasing life and start meeting it. Another key part of releasing time-based pain is detaching from idealized versions of your life. The version where you succeeded earlier, loved better, or avoided heartbreak. Those versions don't exist, not because you failed, but because they were based on assumptions, not reality. When you idealize a life that never happened, you reject the one that did. And the life you're in, no matter how imperfect, is still worthy of your attention. Your presence is the most powerful way to reclaim lost time, not by making up for it, but by refusing to lose any more of it by living in your head. Every time you return to your breath, your senses, your body, you reclaim a moment, and those moments, added together, become a life. Regret can be a teacher, but only if you let it speak without letting it scream. Its job is not to torment you. Its job is to show you what matters now, what still needs healing, what still calls for your attention. Once you've listened, you don't need to keep reliving the story. You can thank it and move forward. This forward movement isn't about drastic change, it's about alignment. Aligning your current actions with the values you wish you had honored sooner, speaking the truth you used to silence, setting boundaries you didn't know you needed, giving yourself grace in moments you once punished yourself. 4. That's how you honor the past, not by staying in it, but by letting it inform how you show up now. Sometimes, it helps to visualize a younger version of yourself, the one who made those choices or avoided them. Speak to them the way you would to someone you love, not with judgment but with understanding. Tell them what they didn't know. Show them the compassion they didn't receive. Let them be seen so they can stop acting out through self-sabotage or fear. Time isn't just something you lose. It's also something you hold. You hold it in how you treat yourself, in how you forgive, in how you begin again. There are years ahead that can still feel rich, meaningful, and deeply aligned if you stop seeing the past as proof of what's not possible. There is a quiet strength in saying, "I didn't know then, but I do now." That shift is everything. It opens the door to a future shaped not by shame, but by choice. You may never erase the ache of what didn't happen, but you can stop letting it steal your joy from what still can. You can learn to trust that there's still more life in front of you, and it doesn't need to look like anyone else's version of success. It just needs to be real. It just needs to be yours. This is how you reclaim time, not by chasing what's lost, but by choosing what's next. And that choice, it starts right here. There's a quiet power in facing the life you have, not the one you lost. That moment when you stop chasing a better past and start honoring the present becomes a turning point. But sometimes, instead of honoring what's here, we try to rise above it. We label discomfort as low vibration. We call pain an atgb.low.com illusion, and we wrap avoidance in words that sound wise. It feels like progress, but something stays stuck. Not because we're doing too little, but because we're skipping the hard part, the honest part, the human part. That's not healing, that's bypassing. In today's world, there's a version of spirituality that promises peace without process, positivity without pain, clarity without confusion. It looks calm on the surface, but underneath, there's denial, avoidance, dressed up as enlightenment. This is what's known as spiritual bypassing, using spiritual ideas to avoid emotional growth, and it's more common than we admit. Spiritual bypassing often sounds like wisdom. It says things like, everything happens for a reason, or just stay high vibe when someone is grieving. It encourages forgiveness before there's been any real processing. It rushes to clarity when someone is still in the fog of shock. It offers mantras instead of presence. And although it's usually well-meaning, it leaves people feeling unseen, dismissed, and alone in their suffering. True acceptance doesn't skip pain. It sits with it. It listens. It lets the body shake, the voice break, the questions come. It holds space for discomfort without trying to clean it up too fast. There is nothing wrong with using spiritual tools, but when they are used to escape rather than explore, the deeper work gets blocked. Pain doesn't go away because it's ignored. It just goes underground, and from there, it controls you in quieter, more subtle ways. Avoidance can wear many masks. It might show up as constant meditation with no emotional reflection, as reading spiritual books but avoiding difficult conversations, as believing you're beyond triggers while your relationships keep falling apart. Growth doesn't mean you never get triggered. It means you know how to respond when you do. And that requires emotional honesty, not just elevated thoughts. One of the reasons spiritual bypassing is so seductive is because it promises quick relief. And after a lifetime of pain, who wouldn't want that? But peace built on avoidance is fragile. It crumbles the moment reality gets hard. True peace, the kind that lasts, is built by walking through discomfort, not around it. It's built by feeling grief fully, by facing regret honestly, by letting the truth be loud even when it's inconvenient. A big part of this work is learning to sit with contradictions. You can feel deep gratitude and still experience sadness. You can trust the process and still be angry about how it unfolded. You can believe in healing and still feel broken. None of these things cancel each other out. Holding multiple truths at once is a sign of maturity. The more you allow complexity, the more grounded your spirituality becomes. Embodied acceptance is different from concept-based understanding. You might know all the right words: surrender, presence, flow, but your body still tells the truth. If your jaw is tight, if your stomach sinks every time you think about a situation, if you find yourself mentally escaping hard conversations, there's something that hasn't been accepted yet. The body speaks before the mind does, and spiritual language won't override it. This is why somatic awareness is so important. To really accept life, you have to include the body in the process. Emotions are physiological. They move through breath, through sensation, through expression. If you try to bypass that and only work through the mind, your healing stays incomplete. You might look composed, but inside, you're holding back tears that need to be cried, anger that needs to be felt, fear that needs to be named. There's no shame in bypassing. Everyone does it sometimes, especially in the beginning. The problem isn't that you avoided something, it's when you convince yourself you didn't. That's where the disconnection grows. Growth starts when you say, "I thought I healed this, but it still hurts." That humility opens the door to real transformation. And from that place, spiritual tools become supportive rather than suppressive. True acceptance requires staying present with what's uncomfortable, not fixing it right away, not trying to find a silver lining before the wound has been cleaned. Just staying, watching, listening, feeling. Over time, the nervous system learns that pain can be held without needing to run, that safety can exist even when the heart is heavy. This is how emotional resilience is built slowly, gently, truthfully. A major sign of bypassing is premature forgiveness, saying, "I forgive them," without having first acknowledged the depth of your pain. Forgiveness that skips grief becomes a performance. It doesn't free you. It pressures you to feel what you don't feel yet. Real forgiveness, when it comes, is not forced. It's a byproduct of healing, and healing takes time. It's not a straight path, and it's definitely not always peaceful. Some teachings say that pain is only the result of attachment. While there's some truth in that, it's not the whole picture. Pain is part of being human. Loss hurts because connection matters. Disappointment hurts because hope exists. Pretending these things shouldn't affect us doesn't make us evolved, it makes us disconnected. Detachment is not the same as disconnection. You can let go without numbing out. Spiritual bypassing can also lead to isolation. If you start believing that every struggle is a sign of low vibration or that suffering means you're not aligned, you begin to hide your pain from others. You withdraw. You pretend to be okay. But healing thrives in honesty, not image. And no one heals faster because they're pretending to be above their pain. Acceptance means you stop measuring your worth by how calm you appear. It means you allow messiness, setbacks, confusion, and contradiction, and you don't rush to fix any of it. You sit with your humanity. You breathe through it. You meet yourself where you are instead of where you think you should be. Another form of bypassing is over-relying on spiritual identity, becoming attached to being a healer, light worker, or empath in a way that creates separation rather than connection. When identity becomes a shield against doing the inner work, it creates a barrier. Labels don't heal you, practice does. Being open, being accountable, being real. Real spirituality isn't about being above the world, it's about being deeply in it, with all its discomfort and beauty. It's about staying when it's hard, loving when it's risky, grieving when it hurts. That kind of depth doesn't come from reading quotes. It comes from living through difficulty with your eyes open. This work also includes questioning your spiritual beliefs, not to abandon them, but to make sure they're rooted in truth, not escape. Ask yourself, am I using this belief to grow or to avoid? Is it helping? me become more honest or more detached from reality? Is it deepening my compassion or making me judge others who are struggling? Compassion is a sign that spirituality is working, not how calm you are, not how perfect your practice looks, but how kind you become to yourself and to others. Bypassing makes you rigid. Real healing softens you. It makes you slower to judge, quicker to understand. It makes you safe for others to be real around. One of the deepest truths is that spiritual growth requires discomfort, not as punishment, but as a path. The parts of you that resist are the parts that are still protecting pain. The more you meet those parts with presence, the more they relax. Not because you told them to, but because you showed up with safety instead of shame. You don't have to let go of your practices. You just have to let go of using them to hide. Meditation, prayer, rituals, all of them are powerful, but they work best when you bring your full self to them, not just the polished parts, not just the ones that feel spiritual, but the raw, grieving, disappointed, and confused parts too. Acceptance is not passive. It's the most courageous act of being present with what is, without needing it. To be different in order to love it. That kind of presence changes you. It teaches you to breathe through heartbreak, to stay with discomfort, to find peace, not through avoidance, but through truth. The path to that peace is not always smooth. There will be moments you want to check out, to float above, to avoid. That's okay. The key is to notice when you're drifting and to come back to your breath, to your body, to this moment, to the part of you that's still learning to feel safe in the truth. You're not behind if you still struggle. You're not failing if it still hurts. You're human. And the more you honor that, the more real your healing becomes. There is no gold star for bypassing pain, but there is profound peace in walking through it, one honest step at a time. This is what acceptance really looks like. Not perfect, not polished, but whole. And that wholeness, that's what brings you home. The deeper you move into honest presence, the more you start to see how healing doesn't only happen in big, dramatic waves. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it happens in the smallest spaces, a pause before reacting, a breath before judging, a softening when the day doesn't go as planned. True. Acceptance is not just found in the heavy moments of heartbreak or deep inner work. It, 39S, found in the broker end. Invisible choices you make dozens of times each day, the ones no one sees but you, and those are the choices that shape who you become. We tend to think of transformation as something grand, a spiritual breakthrough, a life-altering realization, a moment that changes everything. But identity is not rewritten in a single event. It's reshaped in small decisions. The way you talk to yourself when you 39, rerunning late. The way you respond to someone who cuts you off. The way you breathe when your plans fall apart. These are micro moments, tiny points of friction that give you a chance to choose presence over pressure. And over time, they do something extraordinary. They shift your entire way of being. Micro-acceptance means recognizing these moments and learning how to meet them without resistance. Most people overlook them. They think they're too small to matter. But these are the places where your nervous system either tightens or relaxes, where your identity either contracts into reactivity or expands into awareness. It starts the moment your morning dozen, 39, tea go as expected. Maybe your alarm fails, your coffee spills, your inbox is full of things you didn't ask for, your body gets tense, Your thoughts race, your mood shifts. That's where the first opportunity appears. You could react out of habit, frustration, blame, urgency. Or you could pause. You could name what's happening. This is discomfort. This is not what I planned. And then breathe. That simple act doesn't fix the situation, but it softens your reaction to it. It keeps your energy from being hijacked. It tells your brain, this is not a threat. We don't have to go to war over this. That's a micro act of letting go, and your nervous system remembers. Identity is not just what you think of yourself. It, 39. What you practice becoming in repeated moments of tension. When you choose to not spiral over a minor inconvenience, you're not just calming your day. You're becoming someone who doesn't collapse in chaos. You're forming a new emotional baseline, one that allows more freedom, more choice, more trust in your own stability. These tiny decisions are easy to miss, especially in a world that glorifies constant reaction, notifications, opinions, delays, noise. But when you're intentional, even the mundane becomes a mirror. A slow line at the grocery store becomes a chance to observe your need for control. A rude comment becomes a moment to notice your urge to defend. These aren't tests to pass. They're invitations to respond differently. Each time you choose stillness over stress, curiosity over assumption, gentleness over urgency, you train your mind to respond with wisdom rather than instinct. And this training accumulates. It becomes who you are without needing to think about it. You stop identifying as the person who always reacts, always fixes, always rushes. You start knowing yourself as the one who can stay grounded even when things are off course. Some of the most powerful micro-acceptance practices begin in the body. The subtle way your shoulders rise when someone interrupts you, the way your jaw tightens when plans change, the shallow breath when you feel unseen. Noticing these responses and relaxing them even slightly sends signals of safety back to the brain. It rewires you for calm, not because the situation changed, but because your relationship to it did. Language also plays a part. The words you use in small frustrations shape how your brain interprets the world. When you say, "This always happens to me," you reinforce helplessness. When you say, "This is annoying, but I can handle it," you anchor into capability. Self-talk in minor stress builds emotional tone, and that tone becomes the emotional atmosphere you live in. Rejection is another daily moment that often goes unprocessed. Someone doesn't text back. You get overlooked. Your offer gets ignored. These seem minor, but they spark deep wiring. If unacknowledged, they fuel the belief that you're not wanted or valuable. But when you meet rejection with awareness, you unhook from that narrative. You say, "This stings," but it's not a definition, it's a moment, and you keep breathing through it. That builds resilience, not from defense, but from clarity. Micro-acceptance doesn't mean suppressing how you feel. It means letting yourself feel fully without being consumed by the feeling. You don't need to hide your frustration or pretend you're okay. You just need to not make your reaction the center of everything. You step back, observe it, and allow it. And that simple skill, the space between reaction and response, becomes one of your greatest sources of power. There's also deep value in letting go of outcomes, not just in major goals, but in tiny preferences. Wanting the day to go smoothly, hoping someone responds the way you planned, wishing others saw your effort. These little desires pile up, and when they aren't met, tension builds. But when you practice releasing your grip on the small stuff, you free up so much mental space. You're no longer drained by what you can't control. You become more flexible, more open to life as it unfolds. Micro-acceptance also changes how you interact with others. A friend cancels plans. A coworker doesn't follow through. Someone makes a careless remark. In these moments, your ego wants to react with blame, withdrawal, resentment. But if you pause, you'll notice the space between the trigger and the story you create. That space is where healing begins. You choose not to take it personally, not because it didn't affect you, but because you refuse to carry what isn't yours. That's quiet liberation. These small acts of letting go also teach your nervous system to trust. Trust that you don't need to control every variable to feel safe. Trust that you can face disappointment and stay intact. Trust that life can be imperfect and still be beautiful. This trust doesn't arrive all at once. It's built moment by moment in places most people overlook. Another layer of micro-acceptance is letting go of how things should feel. Maybe a moment of rest still feels anxious. Maybe a meditation doesn't bring peace. Maybe your joy is interrupted by guilt. Letting go of the expectation that healing feels good all the time is itself a deep act of healing. It allows the process to be real, not idealized. And in that reality, you find more stability. You can also practice acceptance in how you structure your time. When your to-do list stays unfinished, when your energy dips unexpectedly, when the day gets interrupted, these are all chances to meet of yourself with compassion instead of criticism. Your productivity doesn't determine your worth. Your presence does. When you accept your limits, your rhythms, your pauses, you stop pushing against yourself. You start moving with your own life force. There's also the practice of accepting how others see you, especially in small misunderstandings. Someone misreads your tone, assumes your intent, overlooks your effort. These moments used to demand explanation, proof, correction. But now, you practice letting go of the need to be fully understood. You know who you are. You're learning to be okay with not controlling how you're seen. That's freedom in its quietest form. Micro-acceptance includes releasing the day as it ends, letting go of what didn't get done. What was said or unsaid? What could have gone better? Instead of replaying and rewriting, you say, "It happened. It's done." You let the day close without dragging it into tomorrow. That small release, done consistently, builds a mind that can rest, a body that can soften, a spirit that isn't carrying old weight. These daily acts of letting go are cumulative. They don't erase struggle, but they change your posture. Within it, you become less reactive, more rooted, less dependent on outcomes, more anchored in your response. You start to feel at home in yourself, not because life is smooth, but because you've stopped making every bump a battle. Over time, these moments become your practice. Not dramatic, not perfect, but real. They redefine what it means to be strong, not unshaken, but deeply responsive, not above life, but fully present within it. This is how your identity shifts, not by becoming someone else, but by consistently showing up as someone who chooses peace, even when it's inconvenient. This is the quiet revolution, the kind that doesn't announce itself but rewrites everything. And it begins in the smallest places, the ones within reach right now. Letting go in the small, everyday moments builds something quiet, but lasting, a different kind of strength, one not based on force, but on clarity. But even as you practice micro-acceptance, there's a deep deeper current underneath it all, a strong, often invisible pull that drives so many of your reactions, thoughts, and choices. It's the need to control. And the more you look at it, the more you start to see how much of your suffering comes not from what's happening, but from your resistance to not being in charge of it. Control is comforting. It gives a false sense of certainty, but temporary relief from the unknown. When things feel chaotic, control feels like safety, but it's not real safety, it's strategy. And behind that, strategy is fear. The fear of being powerless, of being hurt again, of losing something important. So we tighten, we plan everything, we analyze every word, we try to manage how others see us, how our future unfolds, how every detail turns out. This feels smart at first, but eventually it becomes a cage. At the root of control is a belief that if I can just manage everything carefully enough, I won't have to feel pain. That belief is often formed early in life. Maybe when chaos in your environment made you feel unsafe. Maybe when someone let you down and you had to become the strong one. Or maybe when emotions felt too big and managing everything around you was the only way to stay grounded. Control wasn't born out of arrogance, it was born out of survival. But what once protected you is now preventing you from actually living. The mind is designed to look for patterns and solve problems. When it encounters uncertainty, it panics. It wants something to grab onto. Control gives it that temporary anchor, but that same anchor becomes a burden. Because the world will never fully match your plans. People will not always act the way you need them to. Life will not unfold according to your checklist. And the more you demand that it does, the more anxious you become. The more you chase perfection, the more unstable your peace becomes. This kind of control addiction isn't just mental, it's physiological. Your body becomes wired for tension. Your nervous system gets used to scanning for danger. You rehearse conversations before they happen, obsess over decisions after they're made, micromanage relationships until they collapse under the pressure. This doesn't make you broken. It means your system is confused, mistaking control for safety when what you actually need is trust. Trust doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what you can, then releasing the outcome. It means staying open to what unfolds, even if it's not what you hoped. But to do that, you have to understand why your brain clings so tightly in the first place. Control is addictive because it offers predictability. It gives the illusion that if you do everything right, nothing will go wrong. That illusion is comforting, especially when you've experienced the opposite, when things did go wrong despite your best efforts. In those moments, the mind becomes more rigid. It decides that freedom is dangerous and control is the only way to stay safe. This is the birth of responsibility, feeling like everything depends on you. Over time, this pattern wears down your emotional system. You stop trusting others. You stop trusting time. You even stop trusting your own ability to respond if things fall apart. Control disconnects you from resilience. It's the opposite of presence. Because when you're trying to manage everything, you're not experiencing anything. You're in your head, forecasting, correcting, bracing. The process of unhooking from control begins with awareness, noticing the grip, noticing the thoughts. That spiral when something doesn't go as planned. Noticing how your body reacts when things feel out of reach. There's often a tightness in the chest, in the jaw, in the breath. That tightness is not just physical, it's emotional. It's the body saying, "I'm not okay with this." That's where you start by listening to the grip instead of fighting it. You can ask yourself questions that bring clarity. What am I trying to prevent right now? What do I fear will happen if I don't control this? What emotion am I avoiding? Often the answers lead to deeper wounds. Fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of being seen as not enough. When you get to the root, you stop treating control like a personality trait and start seeing it as a protective habit. Another powerful practice is beginning to let go in controlled environments, choosing not to overplan your day, letting someone else take the lead, allowing a conversation to unfold without preparing for every possibility. These seem small, but they retrain the nervous system. They teach your brain that uncertainty isn't fatal, that discomfort isn't danger, that you can survive not knowing. Learning to hold space for uncertainty is one of the most important skills you can develop. It gives you back your emotional bandwidth. Because control is exhausting, it's a constant performance. When you start releasing it, even slowly, you begin to reclaim energy, presence, spontaneity. You stop bracing for pain and start making space for life. Sometimes people think letting go of control means becoming passive. It doesn't. It means shifting from force to flow, from micromanaging to trusting your capacity to adapt. You still care. You still act. But you no longer assume that your safety depends on managing everything. You start building internal security instead of relying on external control. Another hidden layer of control is identity control, trying to curate how others see you. This creates anxiety around being misunderstood or rejected. You become hyper-aware of how you're perceived. You second-guess your words, hide your needs, shrink your truth. This is control in disguise, and it leads to disconnection from others and from your real self. Releasing identity control means allowing others to misread you sometimes. It means choosing self-honesty over approval. That doesn't mean being careless. It means being real, even when it risks not being liked. Because peace doesn't come from being seen as perfect, it comes from being free to be yourself fully. Letting go also means releasing outcomes. You do your best, but you stop needing a guaranteed result to feel okay. You stop needing things to go exactly your way. You stop tying your peace to performance. This gives you emotional flexibility. You adapt instead of collapse. You respond instead of react. You begin to trust that not getting what you wanted doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something else is unfolding. At the heart of all this is surrender, not the kind that gives up, the kind that opens up. Surrender says, I'll meet life where it is, not just where I want it to be. That kind of openness builds real confidence, because you're no longer scared of being surprised. You're grounded in your ability to stay centered, no matter what arrives. Releasing control doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you stop making resistance your default. You stop trying to bend reality to your preferences. You start moving with it, listening to it, learning from it. And in that shift, you become lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying the pressure to fix it all. This is a long process. Sometimes you'll slip back into control. That's okay. The point isn't to never grip, it's to recognize the grip sooner, to release faster, to trust deeper. Each time you catch yourself and soften, your brain rewires a little more. Your nervous system finds more space. Your life becomes less about defense and more about depth. And slowly, the need to control starts to dissolve. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped needing control to feel safe. You started building safety inside your own presence. That's where freedom lives. Not in control, but in clarity. Not in managing life, but in meeting it. As it is, as you are, without the grip, without the war, just the breath, just the truth, just this moment. And that is enough. The moment you begin to loosen your grip on control, you start to experience life differently. You stop trying to shape every moment, to fit your expectations, and start noticing what has always been right in front of you. There, 39. A subtle shift, less tension, more noticing, less pushing, more observing. But to truly understand non-resistance, you don't need more theories. You need a mirror. And one of the clearest mirrors for this is the natural world. Not through poetry or metaphor, but through the raw, unfiltered way it exists, without judgment, without struggle, without the need to be anything other than what it is. Nature doesn't argue with itself. It doesn't resist change. It doesn't demand fairness. It simply moves, in rhythms, in cycles, in response to what is. The river doesn't punish the rock for being in its path. It flows around it. The tree doesn't hate the storm. It bends, it sheds, it regrows. This is not weakness. It's intelligence without resistance, strength without attachment. Nature has no need for control because it operates through presence, adaptability, and inherent trust in its own unfolding. This doesn't mean nature is gentle. It can be violent, unpredictable, destructive. But even its destruction holds purpose. A forest fire clears old growth to make way for new life. A volcanic eruption reshapes the land. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forced. Nature never asks if it's too late or if it failed. It doesn't carry regret. It doesn't personalize weather. And in that, it teaches us one of the deepest lessons in acceptance, that things happen without needing our permission, and they keep happening even when we resist them. The human mind struggles with this. It wants fairness. It wants logic. It wants timelines and closure, guarantees. Nature offers none of these, and yet it thrives. Its indifference is not cruelty. It's clarity. It shows you how to live in alignment with what's real, rather than clinging to what you wish were true. And the more you study it, the more you start to understand that resistance is not necessary for survival. In fact, it, 39, often what gets in the way. Non-resistance does not mean passivity. It means acting from alignment instead of reactivity. Nature acts constantly, seeds grow, tides shift, ecosystems evolve. But nothing is wasted on blame. Nothing is delayed by shame. You never see a flower rushing to bloom faster because it feels behind. You never see the moon apologizing for being dark. There is movement, but never panic. That steadiness teaches something important. Life does not need your control to move forward. It needs your attention, your awareness, your willingness to participate without trying to dominate. Natural rhythms are not just beautiful, they are deeply instructive. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. There is effort, and then there is rest. There is fullness, and then there is release. These cycles exist in your life, too. You are not meant to always be producing, achieving, solving. There is time for expansion and time for contraction, time for clarity and time for confusion. Nature honors each phase without shame. So can you. There is also profound humility in how nature accepts what it cannot change. A tree doesn't fight Gravity. A mountain doesn't reject erosion. Even the most solid things slowly shift and reshape over time. When you resist change, you're not protecting yourself, you're separating yourself from the way life naturally works, and that separation creates suffering. It makes you feel like something is wrong just because something is changing. But when you see change as part of the rhythm, not a punishment, everything softens. Nature also teaches patience. Nothing meaningful grows overnight. The strongest roots are the slowest to form. The most lasting change happens beneath the surface. And yet, we rush. We want resolution before we've fully lived the experience. But healing has its own pace. Just like seasons don't skip steps, neither can you. If you, 39, in a winter, let it be winter. The soil is still doing its work, even when nothing blooms. Watching nature helps you reconnect with the intelligence of timing. You start to feel less urgency to fix and more willingness to witness. You understand that your emotions, like weather, come and go. You don't need to fight every storm. You can shelter, you can wait, you can let it pass, and it will. Because nothing in nature stays stuck. Even stillness is moving. There's also a deep lesson in how nature coexists with discomfort. Rocks don't try to smooth themselves. Outwater does that over time. Animals don't avoid pain. They respond, they adapt, and they rest. Trees continue to grow, even with broken branches. There's no story about how things should be, only a response to how things are. This is not detachment, it's presence. It's the wisdom of being fully in life without needing it to be perfect to find peace in it. One of the most powerful forms of acceptance is learning to stop arguing with conditions. The weather doesn't ask for your opinion. The waves don't wait for your approval. In the same way, parts of life will unfold with or without your agreement. When you stop expecting the world to match your preferences, you begin to experience a deeper kind of peace, not because the world changed, but because your lens did. Judgment is another place where nature teaches gently but firmly. A leaf falls, a branch breaks, a bird flies away. These are not good or bad. They are just movement. In contrast, the human mind labels everything: success, failure, good, bad, worthy, not enough. And these labels create stress. They separate you from what is. But the more you observe nature, the more you realize that life simply moves, without punishment, without praise. And that neutrality, when practiced, becomes freedom. Learning from nature also invites you to slow down. Slowness is not laziness, it's accuracy. It allows you to feel instead of react, to notice instead of assume, to respond instead of control. This doesn't mean you stop taking action. It means your action becomes more effective, more rooted, less frantic. You act from center, not from fear. Nature never rushes its growth. When you learn to trust your own pace, your own unfolding, you stop measuring yourself by someone else's timeline. You stop thinking you're behind just because you're resting. You begin to see that integration often happens in the quiet, in the pauses, in the spaces between effort. That insight alone can change the way you heal, the way you create, the way you live. Connection to nature can also be a reset for the nervous system. Just being mere trees, water, or open sky reminds the body of something ancient. It pulls you out of thought and into sensation, out of loops, and into presence. Even if you can't always be in wild places, tuning into natural rhythms, sunrise, moon cycles, weather brings you closer to the part of you that remembers how to simply be. This kind of attention trains acceptance. When you observe nature long enough, you begin to mirror it. You start letting things end when they need to end. You start honoring what's alive without needing it to last forever. You stop fighting mess and start recognizing it as part of a larger pattern, one that doesn't always make sense at first, but eventually reveals its shape. There's wisdom in how nature makes room for everything. Death, decay, renewal, nothing is excluded. Even rot has purpose. Even silence has weight. When you stop trying to edit your experience into something more comfortable, you begin to feel held by something bigger, not controlled, not saved, but held by the same intelligence that grows forests and moves tides and repairs ecosystems. That intelligence lives in you, too. Your body knows how to regulate, your heart knows how to grieve, your spirit knows how to return. You don't always need to figure it out. You need to make space for what's already unfolding. The more you learn from nature, the more you begin to trust your own rhythms. The need to fix becomes the ability to feel. The need to manage becomes the capacity to meet. The need to understand becomes the willingness to experience. You're not separate from nature. You are nature, with thoughts, with consciousness, but also with seasons, instincts, and internal weather. When you treat your process like a force to be controlled, you break your own rhythm. When you treat your process like a living system, you begin to grow in the way that only truth allows. Acceptance, at its core, is not resignation. It's participation. It's choosing to show up for life, even when it doesn't go according to plan. Nature never gives up, it just continues. It adjusts, it regenerates, and when you align with that, you stop looking for peace. You start becoming it, without effort, without perfection, just presence, repeated. That's what nature teaches best, how to belong to life not by fixing it, but by flowing with it. And the more you listen, the more you realize that wisdom has been in you the whole time. There's a quiet clarity that comes when you stop fighting reality and start working with it. Nature teaches this without speaking. It moves, adjusts, lets go, renews. And in that movement, you begin to understand that peace isn't the absence of challenge, it's how you meet it. But what happens when what you're facing isn't a personal discomfort or internal resistance, but something that's deeply wrong? What do you do when peace meets injustice? When acceptance risks sounding like permission? This is where many get stuck, where values and reality collide. It's one thing to accept a missed opportunity or an uncontrollable change. It's another to face harm, cruelty, exploitation, and still talk about acceptance. Here, the word itself starts to feel dangerous. But true acceptance isn't weakness. It's not surrendering your voice or your values. It's the ability to see clearly what is happening without denial, without emotional collapse, and still respond with purpose. It means refusing to waste energy resisting the fact that something is, so you can put that energy into deciding what to do about it. This requires a split-level awareness, the ability to name what's wrong, to stand against it, and yet not let it harden your heart or consume your peace. That's a paradox most people aren't taught to hold. Either they collapse into helplessness or they react with unprocessed rage. But real strength lives in the middle, where you see injustice clearly, feel its weight fully, and still stay anchored in yourself. That's the power of accepting without approving. To do this, you must first separate the event from the emotional distortion that often follows. Something wrong happens, you witness cruelty, discrimination, deceit. Your first response might be fury or grief. These feelings are valid, but what often comes next is personalizing the pain, believing the world is doomed, that nothing you do matters, that people are mostly broken. This is where suffering compounds. This is where reactivity can take the wheel. Acceptance here is the act of seeing the truth clearly, without exaggerating it or collapsing into despair. Acceptance says, this happened, it should not have, and yet it did. That one sentence holds space for both truth and action. It doesn't 39 T numb you. It sharpens your clarity. You stop wasting time wishing the world were different and start facing how it actually is, so you can engage it with intention, not just outrage. Many people confuse acceptance with approval because they haven't learned to sit with emotional contradiction. You can hate something and still accept that it's real. You can disapprove of injustice and still recognize that denying its existence only delays your ability to respond. Without acceptance, you stay in shock, in fantasy, in moral paralysis. With acceptance, you step into discernment. You start asking deeper questions. What needs to be done? What's in my power? How do I protect my peace while staying engaged? This kind of awareness begins with boundaries, not just external, but internal. When you witness injustice, your nervous system absorbs it. You may feel helpless or enraged. You may want to act immediately, fix everything, say everything, but action without regulation often creates more harm than good. Emotional clarity gives you the space to respond instead of explode. It lets you say no with focus instead of fury. Anger itself is not wrong. It's a natural response to violation. But when it's fueled by unprocessed fear, it becomes reactive, scattered, often misplaced. Acceptance helps you ground your anger. It lets you feel it fully without being ruled by it. From there, your anger becomes fuel for boundaries, for truth, for change, not for destruction. Accepting injustice doesn't mean staying silent. It means grounding yourself so your voice carries weight. A reactive voice shouts and burns out. A rooted voice speaks with depth and moves others. This doesn't mean you won't tremble. It doesn't mean you won't cry. But your actions won't be driven by panic. They'll be anchored in clarity. That makes your resistance sustainable. You also start to realize that injustice lives on many levels. Some of it is systemic, some of it is interpersonal, some of it is internalized. Acceptance helps you see where each thread connects. It allows you to acknowledge the grief that comes with witnessing a world that often fails to honor dignity and fairness without turning that grief into apathy or blame. Apathy is the absence of feeling. Blame is the projection of pain. Acceptance is the presence of both without attachment. This practice also reveals how often your own peace depends on trying to control the actions of others. When someone lies, cheats, harms, or takes without care, your peace shatters, not just because of what happened, but because you expected them to be different. Acceptance does not excuse harm. It simply removes the illusion that others are always going to match your standards. It allows you to adjust your expectations without lowering your values. You still speak up. You still hold the line, but you stop expecting people to behave in ways they haven't yet learned. You meet them where they are, not where you hoped they'd be. That shift doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. You stop wasting energy wishing people were better and start deciding how to protect yourself how to engage wisely, how to move forward. You start to build a life that honors your integrity without needing the world around you to validate it. Acceptance also softens the edge of moral perfectionism, the belief that unless you solve everything, you've failed. This kind of pressure often leads to burnout. Acceptance reminds you that you're one part of a larger process, that your work, your voice, your boundaries matter, even if they don't fix everything. You stop measuring impact by results and start measuring it by alignment. Am I living in line with my values? Am I responding with care, with strength, with clarity? That becomes the compass. Injustice often triggers deep feelings of powerlessness. Acceptance helps you separate what's yours to carry from what isn't. You're allowed to care deeply and still not be able to fix it all. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to heal while the world is still broken. This is not abandonment, it's wisdom. ACT's not. Regulated person can do more for justice than a reactive one who burns out and disappears. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's strategic. When you begin to hold this paradox of loving a world that disappoints you, you become someone who resists from a grounded place. You're no longer reacting just to feel better. You're responding because it's what integrity calls for. You don't need to prove your goodness through outrage. You begin to trust your inner compass. And that trust allows you to say no more often, more clearly, with less noise. This trust also gives you the capacity to see nuance. Not every situation is black and white. Not every person is villain or victim. Acceptance helps you sit in the gray, not to excuse harm, but to understand it. From understanding, you create deeper solutions. From understanding, you become more effective, more thoughtful, more consistent in how you engage. That's how movements grow, not just through volume, but through vision, not just through passion, but through presence. Acceptance gives you both. It removes the false comfort of denial and the draining grip of helplessness. It places you back in your body, in your truth, in your agency. Peace and resistance are not opposites. They are partners. One sustains the other. Without peace, resistance burns out. Without resistance, peace becomes complacency. You need both the fire and the stillness, the protest and the pause, the voice that says this is not okay, and the breath that says I can still be okay, even while I face it. This is the paradox of accepting without approving. It's difficult. It requires inner work, emotional honesty, and spiritual depth. But it's also freeing, because once you understand that peace isn't found in a perfect world, but in how you meet an imperfect one, you stop waiting to feel whole. You start becoming it. One clear breath, one strong no, one anchored truth at a time. And that is how you stay human, even when the world forgets to be. Standing for what's right while staying grounded in peace is a rare balance. It asks you to hold complexity without collapsing into reaction, to see the world's mess without letting it harden you. But the truth is, your ability to meet injustice with clarity and compassion starts with how you meet yourself. Because the conflict out there often reflects the conflict within. When you, 39, at war with your own pain, your own history, your own unwanted traits, the world becomes another battlefield. Acceptance, then, must turn inward, not only to the parts you're proud of, but to the parts you hide, the ones you judge, the ones you push away. This is the work of shadow integration. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've disowned, the traits you don't want to admit, the thoughts you deny having, the feelings you label as wrong. It's not evil, it's unaccepted. It's the fear you hide under competence, the anger buried beneath politeness, the envy that lives under fake encouragement. These parts don't go away just because you pretend they're not there. They show up indirectly in projections, in defensiveness, in the patterns you can't seem to break. They speak through sabotage, silence, and overreaction, and the more you avoid them, the more power they hold. Accepting your shadow isn't about indulging it, it's about understanding it. Every disowned part of you once served a purpose. Maybe you were punished for showing emotion, so you learned to stay distant. Maybe you were ridiculed for expressing anger, so you shoved it down. Maybe you grew up being told you had to be the good one, the strong one, the quiet one. So the rest of you got exiled, not because it was bad, but because it wasn't safe. Shadow work begins by becoming aware of these parts, not just intellectually, but emotionally. It's one thing to know you avoid confrontation. It's another to feel the fear underneath it, the memory of being shamed, the belief that love will disappear if you speak up, the story that says your value comes from being easy, agreeable, nice. These aren't flaws, they're protections. They helped you survive, but now they're limiting you. One of the most powerful tools in shadow integration is projection awareness. When someone irritates you, not mildly, but intensely, that reaction often points to something unresolved in you. Maybe it's a trait you've rejected in yourself. Maybe it's an unmet need. When you feel the urge to judge someone harshly, pause, ask, what part of me feels threatened right now? What am I seeing in them that I haven't allowed myself to be? This isn't about blaming yourself for others' behavior. It's about taking back your energy. When you own your shadow, you stop needing to control other people. You stop expecting the world to mirror only the parts of you that you've accepted. You become more curious, less reactive, more open, less defensive. That's real emotional freedom. The shadow also holds your unlived potential, not just your pain, but your power. Traits like confidence, sensuality, ambition, assertiveness. If you were taught those made you selfish, arrogant, or unworthy of love, you may have buried them. But they don't disappear. They wait. They leak out sideways, or they turn into envy, bitterness, self-sabotage. Owning your shadow means reclaiming these capacities, saying, I am allowed to want, I am allowed to take up space, I am allowed to have boundaries. This doesn't make me bad, it makes me whole. Wholeness is not perfection, it's integration. It means you stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You start holding all of you with honesty and care. That doesn't mean you act on every impulse. It means you recognize them, understand them, and choose from awareness rather than avoidance. The more you accept your inner world, the less you react to the outer one. This work is uncomfortable. It asks you to look at things you've spent years avoiding, the jealousy you feel toward people who live more freely, the resentment you hold toward someone who never acknowledged your pain, the self-pity you mask as strength. None of these are wrong. They're just unspoken. And when you speak them, even just to yourself, they soften. They lose their grip. Self-judgment is often what keeps the shadow locked in place. You tell yourself you should be past this. It comes from you're too grown to feel this way, saying that your pain is still invalid because others have had it worse. I want to understand it. Growth doesn't. That approach transforms shame into self-awareness. Another key part of integration is recognizing your masks, the roles you play to avoid rejection, the identities that feel safe but also small. Maybe you're the overachiever, hiding your fear of being average. Maybe you're the helper, afraid to ask for anything yourself. Maybe you're the comedian, covering your sadness with sarcasm. These roles are not fake, they're partial. Shadow work invites you to expand, to let more of you be seen, even when it risks not being approved of. The shadow also includes your unmet needs, the hunger for attention, for validation, for being held. These needs aren't immature, they're human. When you don't acknowledge them, they run your life from underneath. You attach to people who mirror your pain. You chase success, hoping it will fill the silence inside. You overgive, hoping someone will finally give back. But when you start naming these needs clearly, without shame, you stop manipulating others to meet them. You start meeting yourself. Inner conflict begins to dissolve when you stop punishing yourself for being human. The goal isn't to never feel rage, insecurity, or sadness. The goal is to stop pretending those emotions make you unworthy. You can feel deeply and still be grounded. You can carry darkness and still be light. That duality is not a flaw, it's the truth of being alive. Relationships become more honest when you do this work. You stop expecting others to hold what you've rejected. You stop projecting your shadow onto your partner, your boss, your friend. You recognize your triggers as invitations, not threats. And you start choosing connection based on truth, not just comfort. Shadow integration also makes you more compassionate. Not in a performative way, but in a real, felt way. Because once you see your own mess clearly and hold it with care, it becomes harder to judge others for theirs. You don't excuse harm, but you see where it comes from, and that clarity makes your boundaries stronger, not weaker. You no longer need to punish others to feel powerful. You know who you are, and you act from that knowing. This process doesn't have a finish line. New layers of shadow will appear as you grow. That's not failure. That's evolution. Every time you meet a new edge, a fear, a pattern, a wound, you have another chance to choose integration, to stop hiding, to bring more of yourself into the light. The beauty of this work is that it builds self-trust. When you stop running from your inner world, you start trusting that you can handle anything that shows up. You're not scared of being triggered because you know how to explore the trigger. You're not scared of being misunderstood because you're not performing for acceptance. You're not scared of the unknown because you're in relationship with all parts of you, not just the ones that look good. True peace comes from this kind of intimacy with yourself, not because you've resolved every issue, but because you've stopped needing to hide them. Your presence becomes more grounded. Your choices become more aligned. You live from truth, not fear, and that truth holds you even when the world doesn't. So when life gets loud, when others reject you, when parts of you rise up that feel hard to love, meet them, not with judgment, not with shame, but with honesty, curiosity, a willingness to listen. That is the work of shadow integration. That is what makes you whole. Not polished, not perfect, just real, just here, just human fully. The moment you stop hiding from your own shadow, something shifts. You feel more real, more grounded. You, 39, no longer wasting energy pretending. You, 39, no longer at war with yourself, but after facing what? 39, being buried inside. There, 39, another layer of truth that quietly waits to be accepted. Your limits, the parts of life you can't stretch, outrun, or bend into something else. These aren't flaws. They're the shape of your life, And how you meet them determines what kind of life you build. Most people try to escape limits. They treat them like cages, like something to push against. Always needing more time, more freedom, more possibility. But endless options don't always lead to more fulfillment. They often create confusion, anxiety, and indecision. Limits, when seen clearly, don't shrink your life. They shape it. They give it definition, edges, focus. They tell you what truly matters. You might believe that joy comes from doing everything, but depth doesn't come from quantity. It comes from attention, from choosing where you want to invest your energy. Constraints help you do that. They remove the noise and bring clarity. When you stop trying to be everything, you can finally be something deeply, honestly, with your whole self. Creativity, too, thrives on limits. Some of the most powerful ideas are born not in total freedom, but in conditions that force you to be resourceful. When you, 39, re-limited in time, space, or tools, your brain works differently. It searches more deeply. It experiments. It adapts. That tension becomes a doorway to discovery. You learn to work with what you have, and in doing so, uncover strengths you didn't know were there. The same is true emotionally. When you accept the limits of what others can give you, you stop begging for validation. You stop chasing emotional promises that never come. That acceptance creates space. You start showing up with more presence, more agency, because you've stopped outsourcing your peace. Your joy becomes something you build, not something you hope others deliver. Limits also teach you timing, that not everything can happen at once, that some things take years, that some doors close, not because you failed, but because they weren't meant for you. Accepting this brings rest to your nervous system. It stops the frantic chase for the life you think you should have. You return to the one you're already living, and you begin to shape it with intention. There is also wisdom in physical limits. The body changes. It has needs, thresholds, a pace it asks you to respect. When you ignore those limits, you burn out, you disconnect. But when you honor them, you find rhythm. You work smarter, not harder. You learn to pause before collapse. That isn't weakness, it's awareness. Even emotional capacity has its limits. You can, 39, hold everything for everyone. You can, 39, solve what isn't yours. When you finally accept this, boundaries become easier. You say no without guilt. You rest without justifying it. You stop measuring your worth by how much you carry. You start protecting your energy as a sacred resource because it is. Time is one of the clearest constraints we all share. You can't stretch it. You can't hoard it. All you can do is decide how to use it. And when you stop fighting that reality, your priorities sharpen. You begin to focus less on what looks impressive and more on what feels aligned. You stop saying yes to every demand. You let go of obligations rooted in fear, and you start living more on purpose. There's also something deeply grounding about realizing you don't have to master everything. You don't need to be good at every role, every task, every skill. Letting go of that pressure opens you to collaboration, to learning, to asking for help. This builds connection. It softens perfectionism. It reminds you that your value isn't in how much you do, but in how honestly you do it. Limitations also help you recognize enoughness. When you're always reaching for more and more success, more approval, more progress, you never arrive. But when you accept that not everything is yours to chase, you begin to see what's already here. Gratitude becomes clearer. peace becomes accessible. You're not waiting to feel worthy. You already are. Even loss, which can feel like the harshest form of limitation, carries a lesson. It strips away illusion. It shows you what can't be forced. It brings you face to face with impermanence. And in that space, you learn to love more fiercely, to speak more clearly, to live more presently. The limit becomes a teacher, not one you asked for, but one that offers depth you couldn't have found on your own. Purpose also becomes more defined when you accept your limits. You stop scattering your energy across every possible path. You choose, you commit, and that commitment doesn't shrink your freedom. It expands your depth. You build meaning not by doing everything, but by doing something with full heart. That kind of alignment brings fulfillment that constant striving never can. Constraints even shape your relationships. You begin to accept that people are who they are, not who you want them to be. You stop trying to change them. You start meeting them as they are, or you step back with love. This removes resentment. It removes the quiet tug-of-war you've been carrying. Peace enters where expectation once ruled. Letting limits guide you also cultivates maturity. You realize you don't need life to bend in your favor to feel okay. You learn to make meaning inside the reality you've been given. That doesn't mean settling. It means working with what's real, choosing to grow where you've been planted rather than waiting for a different garden. There's power in becoming a person who can stay present inside a boundary, who can feel desire and still practice patience, who can want something deeply and still say, "Not now." That kind of inner strength creates trust in yourself. You know you're not ruled by impulse. You know how to live in alignment, even when the moment doesn't give you everything you want. Children are taught that limits are punishment. Adults who've never re-examined that belief carry it with them. But when you begin to see that limits are structure, not shame, your entire relationship with discipline changes. You begin to crave what keeps you anchored. You start building habits that nourish you. You create a life that holds you, rather than one you constantly chase. This is where freedom quietly begins. Not when everything is possible, but when the right things are prioritized. When you stop escaping discomfort and start shaping your days with intention, the structure becomes safety, the commitment becomes a container for creativity, and your limits no longer feel like chains, they feel like form, like meaning. You begin to see that art is not made from unlimited paint. It's made from boundaries, from choices, from knowing what to leave out. The same is true for your life. What you say no to defines the shape of what you say yes to. Clarity is born from limits. This truth softens the fear of missing out, because you realize missing out is unavoidable. Every choice means 1,000 unchosen paths. That's not failure. That's design. And when you trust that, you stop chasing everything. You choose with care. You live with presence. You honor your time by honoring your no. This shift also helps you meet your past with more grace. You stop regretting that you didn't do it all. You start seeing that what you did choose was valid, even if it was imperfect. You forgive the version of you who had to learn through limits, and you thank them for surviving long enough to hand the pen to do the one writing today. Limits, when embraced, become a compass. They tell you where your values live, where your energy belongs, where your real life is waiting, not the ideal life in your head, the one here, the one unfolding, moment by moment, inside the edges you once tried to escape. And maybe you still want more, maybe there's still ambition. That's not wrong, it just doesn't have to. come from scarcity. It doesn't have to fight against your reality. It can grow inside your current life. Inside the time you do have, the resources you do hold. That's not settling, that's mastery. So you stop seeing limits as threats, and you begin to see them as the very shape of your path. Not obstacles, outlines. Not barriers, invitations to focus, to simplify, to deepen. And when you stop trying to be everywhere, you finally arrive fully here. And from here, everything starts to mean more. Once you begin to honor the structure of your limits instead of resisting them, you no longer feel small, you feel focused. You stop chasing every version of life and start choosing the one that feels most aligned. But there's another form of pressure, one even deeper, often invisible, that can still keep you restless. The version of yourself you think you should be. The image you, 39, built over years of comparison, expectation, and quiet self-criticism. It doesn't matter how present your life becomes. If you're still trying to measure up to a false ideal, you'll always feel behind. The idealized self is built quietly. It starts as a wish to be admired, to be more disciplined, to always say the right thing, to achieve effortlessly, to never disappoint anyone. Over time, that wish becomes a blueprint, an invisible checklist you carry around. And when your real self doesn't match it, you feel guilt, shame, and self-doubt, not because you've done something wrong, but because you're measuring yourself against something unreal. This self-image isn't rooted in authenticity, it's built from fragments, a parent's expectations, a teacher's approval, a culture's definition of success. It doesn't come from truth, it comes from performance. And the longer you chase it, the more disconnected you become from your actual life. You try to fix what was never broken. You try to become someone you were never meant to be. Letting go of the idealized self doesn't mean lowering your standards. It means removing the pressure to become a person who only exists in your imagination. That version might seem perfect, but it's hollow. It's not alive. It doesn't laugh the way you laugh. It doesn't fail and grow. It doesn't know how to feel joy without conditions. It's a projection, a protective one, yes, but still a projection. The mind creates this version to feel in control. It says, if I become this, then I'll be safe. Then I'll be enough. But no matter how close you get, the target moves. The more you achieve, the more the ideal grows. That's because it was never meant to be reached. It was designed to keep you running. Real peace comes when you stop running, when you stop managing your identity like a project, when you start showing up as you are, not as who you think people want. That kind of presence is vulnerable, but it's also powerful, because when you, 39, no longer hiding behind an image, your connections deepen, your energy returns, your voice becomes clearer. Much of this false self is built through comparison, watching others live their curated lives and feeling the need to compete. But the truth is, you're comparing your insides to someone else's outsides. You're holding your private pain against their public success. That distortion fuels the belief that you're behind, that you're not enough. But the self you think they are isn't even real. It's edited, it's filtered, it's controlled. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to lose sight of who you are. And the more you chase someone else, 39, life, the more you abandon your own. The only way back is through honesty, through asking, who am I when I'm not performing? What matters to me, not because it's impressive, but because it feels right? Letting go of the idealized self also means grieving. You grieve the fantasy. You grieve the years spent, chasing a version of yourself you thought would finally make you feel worthy. That grief is important. It's not failure, it's clarity. It's the beginning of coming home. This homecoming starts with small acts, wearing what feels good instead of what's expected, saying what's true instead of what sounds perfect, resting when your body asks, even if your mind says you haven't earned it. These moments may seem insignificant, but they build identity rooted in truth. You stop shaping yourself for approval and start becoming someone you recognize. Much of your suffering comes from rejecting parts of yourself that don't match the ideal. The part that gets anxious, the part that feels insecure, the part that doesn't know what's next. But these parts aren't wrong. They're human. They don't need fixing. They need space. They need to be met with patience, not judgment. Accepting them doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop growing away from yourself. You stop using self-improvement as a disguise for self-rejection. You start asking, how can I grow in alignment with who I am not, in pursuit of who I'm supposed to be? This shift is subtle, but powerful. You go from managing your image to building your life, from defending your identity to exploring it. You make space for contradiction, for complexity, for being both strong and tender, ambitious and uncertain. You become whole or not through perfection, but through inclusion. This wholeness transforms how you relate to others. You no longer need to prove your worth in conversations. You listen more, you soften, you let others see your edges. That openness creates safety, not just for you, but for the people around you. You become a mirror that says, you don't have to pretend here. The more you release the pressure to become your idealized self, the more you realize how much time you've spent managing impressions, planning the right response, curating the right moment, saying yes when you wanted to say no. These habits run deep, but they unravel through awareness, through noticing when you start slipping into performance, through gently coming back to presence. This presence allows your goals to shift. You stop chasing validation and start creating from purpose. You no longer need to be the best, you just want to be real. That authenticity brings peace. It simplifies decisions. It guides your path without needing to prove anything. There's also a kind of joy that returns when you stop trying to be someone else. A quiet joy. Not the combined, loud kind that needs to be posted. The kind that happens when you laugh without rehearsing it. When you speak without editing. When you choose something just because it makes sense to you. That joy is the gift of belonging to yourself. Letting go of the idealized self also helps you face failure differently. You no longer see it as proof that you're broken. You see it as a step, a message, a redirection. You stop attaching your identity to outcomes. You start holding your worth steady, even when things don't go as planned. This steadiness is what you've been seeking all along. Not approval, not perfection, just the feeling of being anchored in yourself, of knowing that who you are beneath the layers is enough, that nothing needs to be added for your presence to matter. When you reach that place, you stop waiting for the world to validate you. You start showing up because it feels good to be here, not to impress, not to win, just to live, to feel, to love, to offer what's yours to give, without apology. And slowly, that false self you built, the one who always had the answers, the one who never felt afraid, the one who carried every expectation, starts to fade. Not violently, just quietly, like mist burning off under the weight of truth. And what's left isn't smaller, it's real. And from that realness, you begin again. Not as someone new, 39, retrying to become, but as someone you finally are. Letting go of the idealized self is one of the deepest acts of honesty. When you stop chasing the version of you that only exists in your mind, you finally meet the person who's been here all along. That meeting opens a door not just to freedom, but to compassion. And sometimes what that compassion has to face is not just emotional discomfort, but the hard physical reality of being in a body that struggles. Because for many, the real challenge is not just who you thought you had to beat, what your body no longer allows you to do. This is where acceptance meets the raw edge of pain, illness, and change that won't go away no matter how hard you fight it. Living with chronic pain or illness forces you to confront limitations you didn't choose. It interrupts plans. It reshapes identity. It makes you question things you never used to think about: your energy, your future, even your worth. And while the world often encourages fighting against pain, there's a different path that leads to peace. Not giving up, but giving in. Surrendering not in defeat, but in recognition of what is, of what no longer works, of what needs care instead of control. Surrender in this context doesn't mean passivity. It means you stop treating your body like an enemy. You stop demanding it perform like it used to. You begin listening to what it's asking for, rather than punishing it for not being what it once was. That shift alone can start to bring relief, not because the pain disappears, but because the war around it begins to quiet. One of the hardest parts of chronic pain is the invisibility. Others may not see it. They may not understand why you cancel plans, why you move slowly, why basic tasks drain your energy. This lack of visibility can make you doubt yourself or feel pressured to pretend you're fine. But pretending costs you energy you can't afford to waste. Acceptance means telling the truth, not for pity, but for peace. You get to name your experience without minimizing it. You get to stop proving your pain to others and start protecting your energy for the things that matter. Agency doesn't mean control. It means choice within limitation. Even when your body feels unpredictable, you still have choices. How you treat yourself, what thoughts you feed, who you surround yourself with, what boundaries you set. Reclaiming agency begins with shifting focus from what you can't do to what you can influence: your breath, your rhythm, your attitude toward your experience. This doesn't mean toxic positivity. It means truth-based courage. It means learning how to live well, even inside discomfort. For many people with chronic conditions, the pursuit of a cure becomes all spent, consuming. Every moment is spent looking for what might fix it. But living this way can delay healing, not physical healing, but emotional integration. At some point, the question changes from, how do I get rid of this, to, how can I live well with this? That change is not giving up, it's waking up. Living with long-term pain often brings grief. Grief for the version of yourself that moved freely, for the things you once did without thinking, for the dreams that now require adjustment. Acceptance gives space for that grief. You don't have to rush it. You don't have to label it. You just have to let it move. Only when it's felt can you begin to rebuild your life in a way that fits what's real now. Rebuilding doesn't mean resigning. It means creating a life that works with your body instead of against it. It means celebrating the wins no one sees: getting out of bed on a hard day, making a meal, taking a walk. These moments are not small when pain is constant. They are evidence of resilience. When you notice them, your mind stops focusing only on what's missing and starts appreciating what's still possible. Another part of reclaiming peace in illness is learning to separate identity from diagnosis. Your condition may impact you, but it is not all of you. When you over-identify with the label, you may lose sight of your wholeness. You become your symptoms. Your entire life narrows into what hurts. Acceptance expands that view. It reminds you, I am still here. I still have preferences, humor, insight, creativity. The Brocco illness lives in me, but it does not erase me. Relationships change when you live with chronic conditions. Some people fade away, others grow closer. Some don't know what to say, and their silence can feel like abandonment. But part of reclaiming your space is recognizing that not everyone is equipped to understand you, and their confusion doesn't have to become your shame. The more honest you are with yourself, the more you'll naturally attract those who hold space without needing you to explain everything. Pain has a way of breaking routines. It makes planning harder. It makes the future feel fragile. One way to respond is to shift from outcome-based living to presence-based living. Instead of measuring your day by what you accomplished, you begin to notice how you showed up. Did you breathe through discomfort? Did you listen to what your body needed? Did you say no when you needed to rest? These moments create a new form of success, not measured by productivity, but by alignment. Rest becomes a form of wisdom. In a world that equates worth with doing, choosing to rest can feel like failure. But when you're living with limited energy, rest becomes strategy. It's how you recover, how you avoid setbacks, how you preserve capacity for joy. Accepting your need for rest isn't weakness, it's intelligence. It's self-respect. Mindfulness practices often help, but only when they're done with compassion, not pressure. You're not trying to meditate your way out of pain. You're trying to bring awareness to the pain without being consumed by it. This subtle shift allows you to coexist with discomfort rather than resist it with tension. Your breath becomes a resource, not to fix anything, but to stay with it, to stay with yourself. Community can also bring relief, not just from friends and family, but from others who live with chronic conditions. Hearing someone say, "Me too," softens the isolation. It reminds you that you're not alone in navigating a body that doesn't always cooperate. In those connections, you may find new language, new coping tools, even new hope. Creativity becomes another tool for expression. Writing, art, movement, sound. These are ways of translating experience when words fall short. They allow you to make meaning out of what feels meaningless. They turn struggle into story, pain into poetry. You stop being just a patient and become a creator again, someone who shapes their experience instead of being shaped by it. Chronic pain also rewires your understanding of strength. You learn that strength is not loud. It's not always visible. Sometimes it looks like canceling plans. Sometimes it sounds like asking for help. Sometimes it feels like doing nothing when the world demands more. This version of strength is slower, quieter but deeper, and it lasts longer because it's rooted in truth. Acceptance doesn't mean you stop seeking improvement. It means you stop tying your peace to results. You can still pursue healing without making your current state wrong. You can still hold hope without turning the present into a problem. That balance between effort and ease, between striving and surrender is what allows life to feel livable again. Your story is not only about what you've lost, it's also about what you've learned. How to slow down, how to listen, how to live with nuance. These lessons don't come through ease, they come through endurance. And they give you insight most people don't have. Not because you asked for it, but because you faced what others avoid. And that insight, it becomes your power. Not in a heroic way, but in a quiet, steady way that lives in your choices, your values, your presence. That presence is healing, not just for you, but for those around you. You become a reminder that even inside limitation, there can be grace. Even inside discomfort, there can be purpose. This is not the life you planned, but it is still a life, and it still matters. The way you show up for it, the way you meet each moment without needing it to be different. That's agency, that's strength, that's peace, even when pain persists. You don't have to become a symbol. You just have to be you, as you are, right here. And the more you honor that, the more whole you feel, even in a body that's healing slowly or not at all. Because acceptance isn't about fixing everything, it's about finally realizing that you were never broken. Accepting the reality of a body in pain reshapes what strength means. It invites presence over pressure, honesty over perfection, and a softer kind of power that can exist even within limits. And once you start living from that deeper truth zone that no longer fights reality but responds to it, you begin to see how ancient that wisdom really is. Long before psychology gave words to surrender, long before medicine explored the body-mind connection, humanity looked to myth to understand suffering, limitation, and letting go. In those stories, buried in symbolism and ritual, are the same truths still asking to be remembered now. Myths were never meant to entertain. They were created to explain the parts of life that can't be controlled: death, loss, sacrifice, change. They offer symbols instead of strategies, images instead of instructions. And in those symbols lie teachings that can't always be spoken directly. They are truths you feel before you understand them. And among their deepest lessons is the reminder that surrender is not the end of strength, it's the beginning of it. One of the clearest examples is the myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned to push a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down every time. At first glance, it looks like pure punishment, eternal futility. But if you look deeper, Sisyphus becomes a mirror. He represents the part of us that keeps trying to overcome what can't be defeated, the part that resists reality so hard that it becomes trapped in repetition. But some interpretations suggest that true freedom for Sisyphus doesn't 39 come from escaping the boulder. It comes from changing how he meets it, from seeing the act not as suffering, but as sacred, as his path. The moment he stops expecting a different outcome is the moment his mind becomes free. In this way, the myth doesn't say, stop trying. It says, stop expecting the result to define your worth. Keep pushing, not because it will free you from pain, but because you've learned how to meet pain with presence. That shift transforms suffering from punishment into purpose, and it reflects one of the deepest truths about surrender. You can't change the mountain, but you can change how you climb it. Another myth that teaches surrender through wisdom is the story of Odin, the Norse god, who willingly hangs himself from the world tree, Yggdrasil, for 9 nights. He gives up his comfort, his certainty, even his sight, to gain insight. He doesn't fight for power. He surrenders everything to gain knowledge. And what he finds is not control, but understanding. He learns the runic symbols that reveal the unseen patterns of the world. Odin's sacrifice is not about loss. It's about transformation. By giving up the things he once thought defined him, he becomes something new. The story shows that surrender is sometimes the price of deeper vision, that the insight you're searching for won't arrive through effort. Alone it arrives when you stop grasping and start listening, when you trust that wisdom often comes in silence, in stillness, in letting go of the version of you that had all the answers. From another tradition comes the story of Shiva, a central figure in Hindu mythology, known not just for his power, but for his role as the destroyer. At first, destruction seems like the opposite of peace, but in this story, destruction is not chaos, it's necessary. Shiva's dance, the Tandava, represents the cycle of creation, preservation, and dissolution. Things must end so new life can emerge. The old self, the old patterns, the clinging identities, they have to dissolve before transformation can happen. Shiva shows us that surrender doesn't always look like stillness. Sometimes it looks like fire, like letting go of attachments that are no longer true, like allowing your world to change even when it scares you. His mythology doesn't say, destroy to escape. It says, destroy to evolve. And that message is especially powerful for anyone who has clung too tightly to a version of life that no longer fits. These myths point toward a similar truth, that surrender is a path, not a single moment. That giving up control is not giving up life. It's returning to the part of you that's been here all along, watching, the part that can sit in the unknown and still feel rooted. These stories last because they speak to what doesn't change, the grief, the fear, the uncertainty, and how humans have always tried to meet it with courage, ritual, and meaning. The myth of Demeter and Persephone also speaks to surrender, but through the lens of love and loss. When Persephone is taken to the underworld, Demeter, the goddess of harvest, falls into grief so deep that the earth stops growing. Her pain is real, her reaction is raw, but over time, a new balance is struck. Persephone lives part of the year in the underworld, and part above. The seasons are born from this cycle. The myth teaches that even the most unbearable loss can be folded into the rhythm of life. That surrender is not forgetting. It's making space for what has changed and continuing to live anyway. In this way, myth offers emotional maps. They don't fix pain, but they give it meaning. They show you that what you're feeling isn't new, that others, through time, culture, and belief, have walked this path. Two, that your surrender is not weakness, it's ancient, it's wise, and it's part of the human story. There's also a reason myths rarely show perfect characters. Their heroes fail, their gods rage, their journeys include loss, betrayal, and fear. Because myth understands something many modern narratives forget: that transformation doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, and presence requires surrender, not to the fantasy of how things should be, but to the truth of how things are. Many of these stories also include a descent into the underworld, into madness, into isolation. But the descent isn't the end, it's the turning point, the moment when all the strategies stop working and something deeper awakens. That's what surrender often feels like losing your grip, like falling. But what the myth reminds you is that every fall contains the seed of return. Not a return to who you were, but to something wiser, fuller, truer. Even in the myth of Icarus, whose wings melted from flying too close to the sun, there's a lesson in restraint. Not to stop dreaming, but to honor limits. Not to reject your wings, but to know when the flight becomes a chase. Surrender in this story is not the warning to stop rising, it's the reminder to rise with wisdom, to balance your fire with humility, to accept that even the sky has its thresholds. Surrender is not silence. It's the pause before clarity, the breath before the next right step. And mythology captures that pause. It doesn't rush you through it. It invites you to stay there longer, to let it work on you. You don't have to interpret myths literally to feel their truth. They live in your bones, in your dreams, in the moments when logic fails and you need something more symbolic to hold on to. They show that your pain is not a personal flaw, it's part of a larger process. And that process, when accepted, reveals something deeper than comfort. It reveals connection. Connection to time, to those who came before you, to parts of yourself that don't speak in words but still know. Myths teach through metaphor what you may not be ready to admit out loud, that life will hurt, that endings will come, that control will slip, and that there's still meaning on the other side of all of it. Surrender is rarely a choice made once, it's made again and again. Each time you meet something you can't fix, each time you lose something you loved, each time the future you planned no longer exists. Myths remind you that you, 39, are not the first to face that moment, and you won't be the last. But you can choose how to walk through it, not with certainty, but with courage. In that courage, something new is born, not control, not predictability, but presence. And presence is what the stories always return to. The one who descends returns. The one who loses finds meaning. The one who lets go gains something they didn't know they were searching for. This is the quiet wisdom of myth, and it's still speaking, not from the past, but from within you, right now. The wisdom found in mythology teaches that surrender is not the absence of strength, but its most sacred form. Myths remind us that pain, failure, and change are not flaws in the story, they are the better story. They prepare us to meet the parts of life that arrive without permission, the moments we didn't ask for, the endings we never chose, because for all the ways we try to build, grow, and control, some things still slip from our hands. A door closes, a chapter ends, a person leaves, and we're left holding questions no one can answer. These are the moments that demand a different kind of acceptance, the kind that begins only after everything else has fallen away. Involuntary endings come in many forms. The job that ended too soon, the relationship that unraveled, the dream that collapsed without warning. These losses create a particular kind of griefone that feels unfinished. There's no preparation, no closure, no ceremony, just the sudden absence of something you were still building your life around. And when that happens, the mind races for explanation. Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? Could I have stopped it? But those questions rarely lead to peace. They lead to loops. They keep you spinning in a story that no longer exists. The first step in navigating these endings is giving yourself permission to name the loss, not just in practical terms, but in emotional ones. You didn't just lose a job, you lost structure, routine, identity. You didn't just lose a relationship, you lost shared dreams, mutual language, a sense of belonging. You didn't just lose a plan, you lost the version of yourself who believed in that plan. Naming these secondary losses matters. It validates the invisible grief. It makes space for the pain that doesn't always get recognized by others. These types of endings often carry shock. Even if something was slowly falling apart, the final moment still lands hard. There's a difference between knowing something's unstable and actually watching it break. That shock interrupts your emotional process. It can delay grief, freeze your reactions, or amplify your confusion. Acceptance in these moments doesn't mean instantly making peace. It means allowing the reality to register, saying, "This happened, I didn't choose it, and I'm still allowed to feel every part of what's here." There's often anger buried beneath these endings, not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like bitterness. Sometimes it shows up as blame. Sometimes it turns inward. That anger isn't wrong. It's the body's way of protecting itself when it's been caught off guard. But if it's not acknowledged, it can harden into resentment. Resentment keeps the story alive in a way that never allows it to evolve. Acceptance starts with saying, "I didn't want this. I didn't ask for it, and now I have to figure out how to live with it." Grieving an ending you didn't choose often brings up identity confusion. If you're no longer in that job, who are you? If that relationship is gone, what happens to all the parts of you that existed inside it? Endings break structure, and while they create space, that space can feel terrifying. The mind wants to fill it with immediate answers. But the most honest thing you can do is sit in the in-between, to say, "I don't know who I am now. I don't know what comes next." That pause is not failure. It's a bridge, and crossing it requires patience. One of the traps of unwanted endings is the urge to rewrite them, to try and make sense of why they happened by imagining different outcomes. But the more you rewrite the past, the longer it takes to step into the present. Acceptance doesn't mean you understand everything. It means you stop arguing with what can't be changed. You stop waiting for a different ending and start deciding how to live with the one you have. That decision doesn't happen all at once. It happens through small choices. Getting out of bed even, when your world feels unfamiliar. Saying no to the temptation to none. Letting someone witness your grief without trying to make it pretty. These moments are not dramatic, but they're powerful. They are the building blocks of a new kind of life not built on certainty, but on truth. Part of accepting an ending is grieving the future it took with it. The plans you made, the milestones you were waiting for, the versions of yourself you were hoping to become. Those dreams were real, and their loss deserves your attention. Skipping this step leaves a shadow, but moving through it brings clarity. Because once you've grieved the future you lost, you can begin to shape the one that still remains. When a door closes without warning, there's often a deep pull to find a new one as fast as possible. You may feel pressure to bounce back, to pivot, to prove you, 39, re-okay. But healing doesn't happen through speed. It happens through presence. If you don't pause, you risk rebuilding your life from reaction rather than intention. You risk choosing what soothes your fear instead of what supports your growth. That pause teaches you to listen differently. You start noticing the difference between what's familiar and what's actually right for you. Endings have a way of stripping everything down to the essentials. What used to feel urgent begins to feel less important. What once defined you no longer does. And in that space, you begin to discover something else or not. The person you used to be, and not the one you were trying to become, but the one who is here now, the one who knows how to sit with the truth and still choose to move forward. This forward motion doesn't mean rushing. It means creating a new relationship with time. You start seeing that just because something ended doesn't mean it was a waste. Some seasons are short. Some Relationships are incomplete. Some dreams weren't meant to stretch across decades. Meaning doesn't only come from longevity. It comes from presence, from impact, from what it revealed about you. You may also begin to notice that this ending has changed how you see others. You become more sensitive to what's unspoken, more aware of how many people are walking around with grief tucked behind their smiles. This doesn't make you fragile, it makes you compassionate, and that compassion creates connection, because now, when someone else faces an unexpected ending, you won't offer empty advice, you'll offer space. And that space is often the most healing gift there is. Letting go of something you didn't want to lose takes time, not just to feel the grief, but to rebuild trust in yourself, in the world, in whatever comes next. That trust is not blind, it's not naive, it's slow, earned, layered. It says, I've been through loss and I'm still here. I may not be the same, but I am still whole. I may be changed, but I am not broken. As that trust returns, so does your creativity. Not necessarily in artistic form, though sometimes it does, but in the way you think, in the way you make decisions, in the way you dream again. The ending didn't erase your imagination. It simply invited you to use it differently, not to escape, but to create, from where you are, with what's still possible. Eventually, what felt like a fracture becomes a doorway, not because the pain disappears, but because you've stopped resisting it, you stop defining your life by what left, you begin to shape it around what stayed. Your integrity, your voice, your ability to love, your capacity to feel. These are not small things. They are everything. And when you look back, the ending will still hurt. It might always hurt, but the story will have grown. You'll see not just the loss, but the way you lived through it, the way you softened instead of closing, the way you made space for what came after. That is your power, not in avoiding endings, but in surviving them. And from that survival, a new kind of beginning slowly unfolds. The hardest endings are the ones we didn't choose, the losses that arrived before we were ready, if we ever could be. But even when we manage to make peace with change, when we rebuild after grief and soften into the life that remains, there's still one truth we often avoid, even though it waits for all of us. One final ending that can't be rewritten, postponed, or reasoned with. Death doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until things feel complete. And yet, when faced directly, it has the power to transform how we live. It becomes the most honest teacher of acceptance we will ever meet. Contemplating death isn't about despair, it's about clarity, about looking at life without filters, without fantasy, not to cause fear, but to remove the distractions that keep us from fully living. Because when you understand that time is limited, that your days are not guaranteed, everything trivial starts to fall away. You stop wasting energy on proving, pleasing, performing. You start asking different questions. Who matters to me? What do I want to feel? What is actually worth my attention? Mortality brings you back to what's real. It reminds you that control is an illusion. You can shape your habits, guide your choices, influence your path, but you cannot protect yourself from impermanence. Trying to do so only creates tension. But when you accept that nothing lasts forever, you begin to cherish it more, not with attachment, but with presence, with gratitude, with an understanding that beauty doesn't need to be permanent to be meaningful. Most people fear death not just because of the unknown, but because of what it reflects. Unlived dreams, unspoken words, relationships left unresolved. death doesn't just threaten life, it exposes how much of it has been avoided. That's why avoidance of death often leads to avoidance of life. You postpone joy. You delay honesty. You pretend there will always be more time. But the truth is, you only ever have this time. When you allow yourself to reflect on death without flinching, something softens, not in weakness, but in wisdom. You start noticing how quickly things change, the way people age, the way opportunities pass, the way even the most difficult seasons eventually shift. This awareness doesn't make life heavier, it makes it sacred. You begin to understand that every ordinary moment is a chance to pay attention. Every breath is a quiet gift. Facing death also brings humility. You realize how little you actually control, how fragile plans are, how quickly everything can change. But instead of making you powerless, this recognition makes you more present. You stop trying to force your way through life and start learning how to participate in it. You make peace with uncertainty, not by liking it, but by seeing it as part of what makes everything matter. Contemplating death also helps you release the pressure to be significant. The legacy you leave is not about grand impact. It's about how you lived, how you loved, how you showed up when no one was watching. You stop chasing validation from people who won't be there at your funeral. You start offering your attention to the ones who sit with you in silence, who make space for your truth, who walk with you even in your uncertainty. This shift invites a kind of generosity. You realize you don't need to hoard your energy for the perfect moment. You can give now, listen now, forgive now, because waiting comes with a cost. It delays the very things that give life its meaning. Death teaches you to stop waiting. It calls you to be alive while you, 39, Re's still here. Grief and mortality also deepen empathy. Once you, 39, V felt the pain of final loss when there, 39. Snow, returning. No Re do you begin to approach others more gently. You speak softer. You love louder. You see people not as roles, but as temporary visitors in your life, and yourself as one in theirs. This awareness creates reverence. You understand that every goodbye might be the last, so you begin to mean your words more. You begin to pause more. You begin to live as though presence is the most valuable thing you have. Reflecting on death also strips away superficial fear. You stop worrying so much about failure, judgment, or disapproval. When you know everything ends, you begin to ask, what's really worth fearing? Is it worse to failure, to never try? Is it worse to be misunderstood, to stay silent your whole life? Mortality doesn't ask these questions to punish you. It offers them as mirrors to help you choose differently. Even your relationship with time begins to change. You stop measuring days by productivity. You start measuring them by alignment. Was I honest today? Did I notice something beautiful? Did I connect, even briefly, with something that mattered? That becomes the new definition of a meaningful day. Not one without struggle, but one lived without numbness. Death also brings clarity to what you carry. You stop holding on to grudges that drain you. You start offering grace to others, not because they earned it, but because you no longer want to waste your life being bitter. Forgiveness becomes less about letting someone else off the hook and more about freeing yourself, about making space for peace while you still have time to feel it. There's also a softening toward yourself. When you truly understand that your time is limited, you begin to treat yourself with more care. You stop waiting until you're perfect to feel proud. You stop postponing self-compassion. You realize that the version of you right now, flawed, growing, uncurious, still worthy of love, especially now, because now is all you really have. Some spiritual traditions encourage daily contemplation of death, not to cause fear, but to awaken the prosings. Mind. The Stoics called it memento mori, member that you will die, not to depress, but to clarify, to help you focus on what matters, to remove the illusion of endless chances. When you live with this awareness, decisions become simpler. You stop wasting time proving, you start investing time connecting. Even how you define success begins to change. It, 39, S, no longer about how much you accumulate. It becomes about how aligned you feel, how peaceful you are, how free you are from chasing things that don't feed your soul. You start asking, what can I release today? What am I holding that isn't mine? What would I regret not saying, not doing, not letting go of? Facing death also deepens your relationship with mystery. You no longer need to explain everything. You stop needing closure for every question. You learn to sit in the unknown, not as punishment, but as part of life. You begin to respect the limits of knowledge, and in that respect, you create space for wonder, for meaning that isn't always logical, for beauty that doesn't need to be defined. Death teaches you about endings, but it also teaches you about returns, not in a literal sense, but in the blinks way life continues through change, the way love lingers after someone is gone, the way impact ripples long after the moment has passed. You begin to see that nothing really disappears, it just transforms. And so do you. This doesn't remove grief, it honors it. You still cry, you still miss, you still wish, but you stop fighting the things. Nature of things. You stop needing permanence in a world that only offers presence. And in that shift, grief becomes part of the fabric of living, not a flaw in the design. Contemplating mortality can feel uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. It removes the pressure to live anyone else's version of a meaningful life. It invites you to define it for yourself, to change course when needed, to leave the path when it no longer feels true. Because you don't owe the world performance, you owe yourself peace. So you begin to ask more honest questions. If I had less time, how would I spend it? If this were my last conversation, what would I say? If I could choose presence over perfection today, what would change? These questions aren't morbid, they're clarifying. They pull you out of distraction and into devotion. They help you build a life that doesn't just look good, but feels alive. Not perfect, not always easy, but true. And when you live this way, aware of the end, but not defined by it, you begin to understand the gift of it all. Not because you have forever, but because you don't. And because of that, everything begins to matter more. Quietly, deeply, fully. Now, contemplating death awakens a kind of vision that cuts through illusion. It reminds you that nothing lasts, that time is fragile, and that peace cannot be postponed. In the face of that clarity, some truths are no longer avoidable. You begin to realize what you're still holding, the pain that never left, the stories that haven't healed, the names that still carry weight in your chest. Loss may teach you how little time you have, but forgiveness teaches you what to do with the time that remains. And not for them, for you. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It's seen as permission, as forgetting, as weakness. But true, forgiveness is none of these. It's not about excusing harm. It's not about denying hurt. It's about deciding that your peace matters more than carrying the weight of what happened. Forgiveness is advanced acceptance. It's the point where you choose to stop reliving the injury, not because it didn't matter, but because it already cost you enough. To forgive doesn't mean the relationship goes back to what it was. It doesn't mean the other person has changed. It doesn't require an apology. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. It's not restoration. It's release. A choice to stop tying your worth, your energy, your attention to someone else's wrongness. A decision to be free, not because they earned it, but because you did. This process begins with honesty. Forgiveness cannot happen until the pain is named. The betrayal, the disappointment, the violation, it has to be felt first. Too often people skip this step and call it forgiveness. But moving on without feeling is not healing, it's suppression. And what you suppress doesn't dissolve. It grows in silence, turns into resentment, and leaks out in your tone, your triggers, your relationships. Real forgiveness begins when you stop pretending you're over it and finally admit what hurt you. Once the truth is named, the work becomes internal. You no longer ask, how do I get them to see what they did? You begin asking, how do I want to live from here? That shift marks the beginning of freedom, because when your healing depends on someone else's awareness, you remain trapped. But when it becomes about your own clarity, your own wholeness, your own return to peace, the path becomes yours again. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a decision repeated over time. There will be days when you remember the pain and the old anger rushes back. That doesn't mean you failed. It means your nervous system is still healing. Forgiveness lives in how you respond to those moments. Do you feed the story again? Rehearse it, build it up. Or do you notice the memory, breathe through it, and remind yourself that you've chosen to no longer carry it? The greatest misconception is that forgiving someone lets them off the hook. But the truth is, they were never fully on the hook to begin with. People don't carry your pain for you. They move on. They rewrite the story. They protect their version of events. Meanwhile, you're the one still holding the weight. Forgiveness isn't letting them go, it's letting yourself go. Out of the story, out of the loop, out of the mental prison where your peace is tied to their remorse. You might also need to forgive people who never meant to hurt you, parents who did the best they could but still left you with wounds, friends who acted from their own unhealed pain, mentors who didn't know how to support you. These moments create confusion. You ask, how do I forgive someone I still love, or someone who never even knew they caused damage? The answer is the same, not through denial, but through understanding, not to make it okay, but to stop letting it define you. Forgiveness does not mean the hurt didn't happen. It means it no longer controls how you love, how you speak, how you see yourself. You stop being the person shaped by what broke you and start being the person shaped by how you chose to heal. This kind of forgiveness is not loud. It doesn't need a declaration. It lives in your body, in the softening of your breath, in the quiet moments where you feel light again for the first time in years. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself, for the words you didn't say, the signs you ignored, the years you stayed, the dreams you let go of. That internal judgment is heavy, and often it's more brutal than anything someone else has said. But holding yourself hostage doesn't create change, it creates shame, and shame keeps you stuck. Forgiveness begins when you tell the truth, without punishing yourself for it. I made the best choice I could with what I knew then. I didn't know how to do better. but I can now. Forgiving yourself isn't about erasing regret. It's about integrating it, learning from it, letting it shape you without defining you. Every mistake becomes a teacher. Every misstep becomes a reminder, not of who you were, but of who you're becoming. You can carry the lesson without carrying the punishment. There's also a deep kind of forgiveness that happens in layers. Sometimes you think it's finished, and then something triggers the memory again. This doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're healing in waves. With each layer, the pain loses some of its power, not all at once, but slowly, like a rope, loosening knot by knot until you finally breathe. Forgiveness also teaches you boundaries. It shows you that peace isn't found in exposure to the same harm. You can forgive someone and still decide they don't have access to you anymore. That boundary is not revenge, it's self-respect. Forgiveness without boundaries is not nobly, it's dangerous. Forgiveness with boundaries is wisdom. It says, I release you from my rage, but I will not abandon myself to keep the peace. This is where forgiveness becomes self-care, not just an emotional concept, but a practical way to live. You sleep better when you're not rehearsing the pain. You think clearer when you're not consumed by resentment. You show up more fully when you're not guarded by unresolved fear. Forgiveness makes room for joy, not because it erases the past, but because it stops dragging the past into every new moment. It's also worth saying that forgiveness is not always instant. It can take months, years, even decades to reach a place where the heart lets go. That timeline doesn't make you broken. It means you're human. Don't rush your process, but don't idolize your pain either. At some point, you will need to choose, do I want to be right about how I was wronged, or do I want to be free? There's a kind of pride that lives in being the victim. It feels righteous. It validates the pain, but staying there too long becomes a cage. Forgiveness invites you out not to forget, but to remember differently. To tell the story from the other side, not from the wound, but from the healing, not from the breakdown, but from the rebuild. Forgiveness is advanced acceptance because it asks you to go beyond logic, to let go, even when there's no apology, to move forward without justice, to find peace in an unfair outcome. This doesn't mean injustice is okay. It means your healing is not waiting for the world to be fair. It's available now. In how you meet this moment, in how you care for your own heart, in how you choose to rise without bitterness. You don't need anyone else to change for you to feel free. You don't need the past to rewrite itself. You don't need time to reverse. You only need this moment. And a willingness to say, I will not carry this anymore. I will not give this pain any more years than it already took. I release this not because they deserve peace, but because I do. That is forgiveness. A choice made quietly, an act of courage, a return to self. True forgiveness is one of the highest forms of acceptance. It demands presence, maturity, and the willingness to stop carrying what no longer serves your life. But once you reach that point of release, a deeper challenge often follows to remain open without losing yourself again, how to love without clinging, how to stay present without being consumed. This is where the conversation shifts to detachment. And for many, this concept feels confusing because it's often mistaken for not caring. But the heart of detachment isn't about walking away from feeling, it's about learning how to feel without losing your balance. Detachment is not apathy. Apathy says nothing matters. Detachment says not everything has to define me. Apathy closes the heart. Detachment keeps it open but steady. It allows you to be involved without becoming entangled, to love someone without needing to control them, to experience pain without becoming the pain, to witness change without panicking. This isn't disconnection, it's grounded presence. It's holding space for what is without making it your entire identity. The confusion between detachment and indifference comes from how often we've seen people shut down in the name of self-protection. But numbness isn't the goal, it's a reaction to overwhelm. True, detachment doesn't come from fear, it comes from clarity. It's not a way to escape discomfort, it's a way to hold it more wisely, to be in the experience without being swallowed by it. One of the core teachings of healthy detachment is the understanding that nothing belongs to you, not people, not outcomes, not even the image of who you thought you'd become. Everything is in motion. And trying to freeze it, hold it, or shape it into what you planned only creates suffering. Detachment invites you to participate in life without gripping it, to enjoy the moment without needing it to last forever. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you discerning. You start responding instead of reacting. You stop trying to force what isn't aligned. You recognize when effort turns into control, and you choose to soften. That softening is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when to let life speak before you answer it. It's choosing to engage with intention, not from urgency. Detachment also teaches emotional responsibility. You begin to understand that other people's emotions are not yours to fix, that you can be compassionate without becoming someone else's container, that you can listen without losing your center. This boundary is not cold, it's kind, because it honors your energy. It allows you to show up with love instead of resentment, with presence instead of pressure. Healthy detachment is rooted in trust. Trust that life unfolds in ways you don't always understand. That you don't need to chase what's meant for you. That space is not emptiness, it's invitation. You stop gripping for control because you no longer believe everything rests on your effort alone. You begin to believe in timing, in cycles, in the quiet intelligence of what unfolds naturally when you stop forcing. This doesn't mean you disengage from people or stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop placing your worth in their hands. You stop tying your peace to how others behave. You learn to love with open hands, not clenched fists. You give without attachment to being needed. You care without the condition of being in control. One of the most beautiful expressions of detachment is allowing someone to walk their path even when it doesn't include you, even when it challenges your hopes, even when their choices are painful to witness. This isn't coldness, it's respect for their autonomy, for their lessons, for the truth that we all find clarity in different ways. Detachment lets you hold space without trying to rearrange it. It also applies to goals. You still pursue them, you still work hard, but you stop building your identity around their success. You stop needing everything to go your way to feel whole. You let the process shape you more than the result. Detachment removes the pressure to prove. It replaces it with a quiet commitment to what feels right, whether or not it leads where you expected. In relationships, detachment creates balance. You stop asking others to be your source of validation. You become whole enough to share love, not search for it. You no longer collapse into someone else's approval or shrink under their rejection. Your value stays with you. This doesn't make you distant, it makes you steady. You connect because you choose to, not because you need to. Detachment also strengthens your boundaries. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You learn that saying no doesn't make you unkind, it makes you honest. You recognize when giving too much turns into self-abandonment, and you adjust, not out of guilt, but out of self-respect. Boundaries are easier to maintain when your worth isn't tied to how others see you. You also begin to accept discomfort as part of growth. Detachment doesn't mean escaping hard emotions. It means letting them move through you without building a new identity around them. You can feel disappointment without despair. You can grieve without getting lost. You can be afraid without being defined by fear. Emotions become experiences, not life sentences. Letting go becomes a practice, not a one-time event. You release not because you don't care, but because clinging is costing you clarity. You allow life to move through you, not stick to you. Detachment helps you navigate endings without bitterness. It helps you welcome new beginnings without needing guarantees. You begin to hold the unknown not as a threat, but as part of being alive. This also means you stop over-identifying with your thoughts. You notice the story, but you no longer become the story. You witness your patterns without letting them drive your choices. This awareness creates space, and in that space, you respond with more freedom, more choice, more alignment. Detachment in spiritual practice is often misunderstood. It's not about rising above the world. It's about being deeply in it, but not ruled by it, feeling fully without being undone, loving deeply without needing possession, participating honestly without losing yourself in performance. This is not detachment as distance, it's detachment as clarity. You stop measuring your day by how much went right and start measuring it by how aligned you remained in the midst of change. You notice how little you actually need to feel peace when you're not resisting what is. You stop chasing highs. You stop avoiding lows. You begin to rest in a quiet steadiness that doesn't depend on external validation. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow unlearning, a returning, a daily practice of softening the grip, of catching yourself when you cling, of remembering that nothing real is threatened by your letting go. What's meant to stay will. What's meant to move must. You stop resisting that truth. You begin to trust it. And in that trust, you find something rare, a heart that stays open without attachment, a life that moves with flow, not fear, a presence that no longer needs to control every outcome to feel free. This is detachment, not as an escape from life, but as a return to it, fully, clearly, gently. Now, the practice of healthy detachment brings clarity, not coldness. It teaches you how to hold space for life without becoming overwhelmed by it, to stay present without over-identifying. But once you begin to live with that kind of balance, a deeper layer of insight begins to form that connects to something timeless. Across centuries and cultures, this kind of acceptance has been explored, tested, and refined by thinkers who didn't just observe suffering, they studied it, lived through it, and found ways to meet it without collapse. This is where radical acceptance finds its roots, not in modern therapy alone, but in ancient wisdom. And few teachings have shaped this truth more clearly than those from Stoicism and Eastern philosophy. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher born into slavery, taught that most of our suffering doesn't come from what happens, it comes from how we respond. He believed we must divide life into two categories: what we can control and what we cannot. His words were simple but life-changing. Some things are up to us and some things are not. To try to control what's not ours is to waste energy, create frustration, and lose peace. Radical acceptance, according to Stoicism, is not passive surrender. It's the courage to focus your effort only where it matters. The Stoic doesn't resist reality, they work with it. If grief arrives, they feel it. If injustice occurs, they respond with reason. But they do not indulge in blame, panic, or bitterness about things that fall outside their control. Not because they are unfeeling, but because they know that resisting the unchangeable only creates more harm. They practice the art of letting go, not of action, but of unnecessary suffering. Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, took a different but parallel approach. He taught the way of Wu Wei, or effortless action. This doesn't mean doing nothing, it means acting in harmony with the natural flow of life. To force is to fight the current, to yield is to trust the river. Lao Tzu observed that life, like water, moves best when it's not rigid. Those who flow as life flows know they need no other force, he wrote. His path to acceptance was not through resistance or suppression, it was through observation, patience, and softness. Taoist wisdom sees control as illusion. It views rigid plans as brittle, and in that softness it finds power. Be like water, says Lao Tzu. Water doesn't avoid the obstacle it flows around it. It shapes the world, not through strength, but through persistence. Radical acceptance, through this lens, is not about enduring life, it's about joining it, merging with what is, rather than wishing it were different. That merging isn't defeat, it's liberation. Buddhist masters, from the earliest texts to modern teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, offer yet another dimension. Their view of suffering, dukkha, says that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, not because desire is wrong, but because clinging to impermanent things leads to disappointment. We suffer when we want what cannot stay, or push away what will not leave. Radical acceptance is the release of that grasp. It's the willingness to stay open, even when things are uncertain, uncomfortable, or impermanent. Mindfulness, a core part of Buddhist practice, becomes the method of acceptance. You don't try to change your thoughts, you observe them. You don't argue with your feelings, you allow them. The breath becomes your anchor, not because it fixes anything, but because it brings you back to what is. No mud, no lotus, Thich Nhat Hanh said. You don't need life to be clean, to be beautiful. You just need to stop turning away. In Buddhism, equanimity is a quality that supports this kind of peace. It's not indifference, it's a balanced mind, steady in pleasure and pain, success and failure. It's the ability to be touched without being toppled. Acceptance, then, is not resignation. It's a deep, conscious engagement with life, just as it is, without needing it to meet your terms. All of these traditions, Stoicism, Taoism, and Buddhism, arrive at the same core truth through different doors, that the world will change, people will disappoint, plans will fail, the body will age, and life will include loss. None of these things are personal failures. They are guarantees. The only question is, how will you meet them? Epictetus says, focus only on what is yours to choose. Lao Tzu says, flow with the nature of things. The Buddha says, release attachment to what cannot last. Together, they teach a path of radical acceptance. That is not about giving up, it's about showing up, fully, without resistance, with clarity, humility, and grace. When you live this way, you no longer need every moment to be pleasant. You simply need it to be real. You stop measuring your peace by how often life agrees with you. You start finding peace in your ability to meet life honestly, regardless of its form. This ancient wisdom doesn't ask you to suppress your feelings. It invites you to include them, to see anger, fear, sadness, and longing as part of the human path, not flaws, but signals, not enemies, but companions. You accept them without acting them out. You listen without being ruled. That's radical. Maturity, that's presence. And the deeper you go into these teachings, the more you start to feel the shift not in your circumstances, but in your center. You begin to release the belief that struggle means failure. You stop demanding certainty. You start creating space between the experience and the reaction. In that space, peace grows not as an escape, but as a rooted truth. Radical acceptance, then, is not passive. It's a quiet revolution, the kind that takes place inside your breath, inside your choices, inside the stories you stop repeating. It's the discipline of staying close to life even when it hurts, and the freedom of letting go not of care, but of control. These teachings may come from ancient voices, but their relevance has never been more alive. Because life is still unpredictable, people are still flawed, pain still comes. And your only true power always will be in how you meet it. Fully present, fully human, fully here. When you begin to embody the kind of acceptance taught by Stoics, Taoists, and Buddhist masters, something shifts. Life stops being a problem to fix and starts becoming something to witness and respond to. You move through it with more presence, less resistance, and a deeper sense of alignment. But even then, there are patterns that return, situations that look different on the surface but feel painfully familiar. Relationships that echo old wounds, challenges that circle back just when you thought you were done with them. And this is not failure, it is life showing you where you still hold on, where you haven't yet let go, where your growth is still asking for depth. This is what's known as the acceptance spiral. The acceptance spiral is the experience of encountering the same emotional lesson in different forms, until you fully surrender to what it's trying to teach you. It, 39. S, not punishment. It, 39. S, not stagnation. It, 39. S, the intelligence of life trying to move something through you that hasn't 39. 8, yet been integrated. These cycles continue not because you, 39, rebroken, but because there is still something in you that needs to be seen, accepted, and released at a deeper level. You might notice the pattern in your relationships. You keep attracting the same dynamic, the distant partner, the unavailable friend, the role where you feel unseen. You think it, 39. S, bad luck, but it, 39. S, not. It, 39. S, your own inner beliefs playing out again and again. Not because you, 39, reconsciously choosing them, but because your subconscious is looking for resolution. It wants to replay the story so that maybe this time you can meet it differently. You can respond instead of react. You can stay present instead of abandon yourself. But until you do, the pattern repeats. These cycles are often uncomfortable. They make you question your progress. But discomfort is not regression. It's a signal that the next layer is ready to be healed. You're not back at the beginning, you're circling deeper. Spirals don't repeat in flat loops. They move down or up, inward or outward. Each time the pattern returns, it brings the chance for more awareness, for more clarity, for more surrender. Letting go in these cycles is rarely about doing something dramatic. It's about changing your relationship to the lesson, not fighting it, not blaming others, not escaping into distraction, but sitting with it, asking what it's showing you, noticing how your reactions mirror the ones you've had before. Acceptance begins when you recognize that the external circumstance isn't the real work. It's the invitation to meet your inner world with honesty. Sometimes the lesson is about boundaries. Sometimes it's about self-worth. Sometimes it's about trust. But no matter the surface situation, the core of the spiral is always emotional surrender, not resignation, not apathy, but a quiet willingness to stop resisting the truth, to feel what's there without needing to control it, to let life be what it is, and respond from clarity instead of fear. This is where most people get stuck. They trying to change the circumstance without changing their inner relationship to it. They leave the job, but find the same frustration in the next one. They end the relationship, but repeat the same patterns with someone new. The scenery shifts, but the emotion underneath stays the same. And that emotion holds the key. When you fully feel it, acknowledge it, and let it move through, the need for the pattern dissolves. The acceptance spiral is also a test of humility. It asks you to admit that you, 39, still learning, even when you thought you were done. It invites you to drop the ego that says, quote, I should be past this by now, quote, and replace it with curiosity, quote, what is this still trying to teach me, quote. That question opens the door to transformation. Not surface change, but cellular change. The kind that rewrites your nervous system, your habits, your self-concept. Every spiral contains a gift, but only if you're willing to look. Sometimes the gift is clarity. Sometimes it's strength. Sometimes it's a deeper relationship with yourself. But you only receive it when you stop fighting the pattern. When you stop shaming yourself for still being in it. When you start meeting yourself with compassion instead of criticism. That shift is what breaks the loop. Life doesn't repeat because it enjoys watching you suffer. It repeats because healing is not intellectual. It, 39, experiential. You have to feel it to release it. You have to meet the pattern in your body, in your breath, in your behavior. Until then, awareness alone is not enough. Knowing the wound is there is step 1. Choosing differently when it gets triggered. That's the work. That's the evolution. Letting go in the spiral doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it looks like crying over something that happened years ago. Sometimes it looks like saying no, even when it terrifies you. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence instead of explaining yourself. These small choices are how the spiral starts to loosen. Not because life got easier, but because your presence grew stronger. One of the reasons these lessons return is because your nervous system learns in layers. Each time a similar situation arises, it gives you the opportunity to respond from a calmer place, a more embodied place, a more rooted place. You're not erasing the past, you're rewriting your response to it. And in that rewriting, you free yourself from having to repeat it again. It's also important to understand that letting go isn't always emotional. Sometimes it's behavioral. It, 39, recognizing that certain habits, people-pleasing, over-explaining, emotional suppression are the way. You've kept the spiral in motion. They're protective, but they're outdated. Letting go means choosing new behaviors that support who you are now, not who you were when the pattern began. This takes courage. because new behavior often feels unsafe, even when it's healthy. Your body is used to the cycle. It knows how to exist in it. Stepping out of it means uncertainty, it means discomfort, but it also means freedom. And that freedom is not loud. It, 39. S, not flashy. It's quiet, like peace, like breath, like no longer needing to rehearse the pain. Sometimes the spiral doesn't break until you let someone go, or until you stop defending the part of you that still wants to prove something. It might not be obvious what needs to shift, but the answer is always found in the moment you choose to stop doing what you've always done. The moment you pause instead of perform. The moment you sit with the feeling instead of run from it. And even when you think you've broken the spiral, it may return one more time. Not to punish you, but to show you how far you've come. To give you the chance to meet it with grace. To realize that your response is different now, that your center is stronger, that your peace is not as easily stolen. That is the quiet victory of acceptance. It doesn't always announce itself, but it lives in how you move, how you beave, love, how you stay steady in a moment that once broke you. The acceptance spiral is a gift disguised as repetition. It brings you back, not to remind you of your wounds, but to reveal your growth, to show you where your power lives now, not in perfection, but in presence. And presence, once chosen over and over again, becomes your way out, not by escaping the cycle, but by no longer needing it to continue. You've just traveled through some of the deepest teachings life has to offer, teachings that don't come in the form of quick fixes or shallow positivity, but through the quiet, powerful path of acceptance. You've explored how the brain rewires itself when we stop resisting, how pain passed through generations loses power when we face it, how time-based regret softens when we release the idea that it should have gone differently. You've learned the difference between bypassing and real presence, how small, daily acts of letting go can transform identity. Why control feels safe but never brings peace. You've seen how nature surrenders without judgment, how we can hold injustice with clarity and still move forward in peace. You've faced the shadow, honored your limits, and let go of the version of yourself you were never meant to be. You've grieved the endings you didn't choose, sat with the truth of death, practiced the courage of forgiveness, and discovered that detachment isn't cold, it's wise. You've walked with the Stoics, the sages, and the stillness of ancient wisdom. You've spiraled through repeated lessons until something inside you finally said, "I'm ready to stop fighting what is." So, as you rest now, carry this with you. Peace doesn't come when everything changes. Peace comes when you do. Not by becoming someone else, but by letting go of the war with what's already here. If one of these teachings touched something in you, if it helped you breathe a little deeper or see your life with a little more kindness, drop a comment below with the words, "I'm learning to let go. Let's grow together in honesty and peace." And if this kind of reflection speaks to you, if you want more moments of insight that meet you where you are, subscribe to the channel and tap the bell. We're not just sharing content here. We're creating a space where you don't have to pretend, where your journey is welcome, and where acceptance becomes your strength. Until next time, rest deeply, let go gently, and remember, you are allowed to be exactly where you are.